The horse stopped because the rider did, not because the trail ended or because the storm let up. Elijah Eli Cutter saw something no man should ever have to see. Three boys huddled against the base of the porch post of his own cabin, their faces red with cold, breath barely making mist in the air. The snow had crusted along their sleeves, their pants soaked through at the knees. But they weren't crying. Not one of them shed a tear. They just looked up at him like they'd been waiting for the world to end. And maybe it just did. Eli slid down from his saddle, boots crunching in knee-deep snow, as he ran the last few yards to his sons. Sam. His voice broke on the oldest name. The boy, barely 10, stirred stiff and tried to stand. Eli fell to his knees in the snow, yanking off his gloves and feeling the ice in their coats, in their boots, in their skin. Joshua, the middle one, shivered uncontrollably, his face pressed into Sam's side. Little Micah didn't even lift his head. "Why are you out here?" Eli asked, voice sharp with fear and something heavier beneath it. Sam tried to speak, but his lips were split and blue. He glanced toward the cabin door just 10 feet away, shut tight against the blizzard. The yellow flicker of firelight clearly visible in the cracks between the logs. He started, then stopped. "She locked us out." Eli's breath left him. It wasn't just the cold. It wasn't just the snow. It was the way Sam said it, like it wasn't the first time, like he didn't expect any different. Eli scooped Micah up, the smallest boy curling instinctively into his chest. Then he took Joshua under one arm and urged Sam to follow. The cabin door wasn't locked when Eli reached it. It didn't even creak as he opened it. Warmth immediate, the smell of stew and wood smoke, a fire roaring in the hearth. And in front of it, curled in a chair with a cup in her hand, sat Charlotte. She didn't even look surprised. "You're home early," she said flatly, her eyes not leaving the fire. Eli didn't speak, not at first. He moved gently, setting Micah near the stove and stripping off the child's soaked coat. He knelt, worked at Joshua's boots, tried to rub warmth back into numb toes. Sam stood frozen in the doorway, like stepping in, without permission, would get him whipped. Eli looked up. "How long?" Charlotte sighed. "They were noisy. I told them to play outside. Didn't think you'd be back till Friday." "It's near dark," Eli said, quiet and sharp. "There's a blizzard coming." "They have coats," she said with a shrug, sipping from her cup. "Don't see the harm in a little cold. Builds grit." Eli rose slowly. He wasn't a man prone to shouting. He didn't clench his fists or bark threats, but there was a heat in his chest now that made his voice low and dangerous. "They're children," he said, "my children." "They're not mine," she snapped, eyes finally lifting. "And this is the worst bargain I ever agreed to." That was the moment something inside Elijah Cutter changed. He looked at her, really looked at her, and realized he'd married a stranger. A pretty face with hands that never softened. A woman who could braid her hair perfect and curl her mouth into sweetness when it suited her. But the mask had slipped now, and there was nothing sweet underneath. "You can pack," Eli said evenly. Charlotte blinked. "What?" "You heard me." Eli didn't answer further. He turned instead, grabbed another blanket off the hook, and wrapped it around Sam's thin shoulders, guiding the boy inside. The door closed behind them, sealing in warmth and tension. The night passed in silence, save for the crackle of the fire and the shifting of quilts as the boys slept. Safe now inside the house that was meant to shelter them. Eli sat awake most of that night, his back to the wall, eyes on the woman across the room who used to share his bed. She didn't speak again, didn't weep, didn't beg. And by morning she was gone. The boys didn't ask where. Part of Eli wanted to leave it at that, but something gnawed at him. The truth. When he asked Sam again, quietly, privately, while the others were still asleep, he learned it hadn't been just one night in the cold. It had been many. When Eli left on his trips, she turned cruel. Meals skipped, chores doubled, punishments that didn't fit the offense. "She said if we told you, she'd make sure you didn't come back next time," Sam whispered, ashamed. Eli closed his eyes. He remembered the bruises Sam had once claimed were from falling, the odd silence when he returned from rides, the way Joshua flinched when a voice was raised, and how little Micah clung tighter every time Eli left. He should have seen it. He should have known. And now all he could do was make it right. Pa, Sam said, eyes still down. She took your silver pocket watch and Ma's locket. Eli's jaw tightened. The watch had been his father's. The locket held a lock of Sarah's hair, all he had left of her since she'd passed, bringing Micah into the world. It doesn't matter, he lied. What mattered was sitting in front of him with haunted eyes. 3 days passed in slow, healing quiet. The boys didn't venture far from the cabin, even when the snow began to melt. Eli slaughtered a chicken, made a stew rich enough to put color back in their cheeks. He sat with Joshua when the nightmares came, held Micah when the boy asked in his small voice if it was his fault the new Ma had gone away. No, Eli said firmly. None of this is your fault. None of it. On the fourth morning, Eli hitching the wagon. We need supplies, he told them. All of us are going to town. Redemption Creek was a day's ride away, a mining settlement that had seen better days when the silver ran thicker. Now it was a collection of weathered buildings with a general store, a church that doubled as a schoolhouse, and Holloway's saloon, named for a man long dead. Eli felt the stares as soon as they pulled in. Faces turned, whispers followed. This wasn't just the usual interest in a family from the outlying farms. This was something else. He tied the horses outside Hammond's general store and helped the boys down. Sam, watch your brothers. I'll be quick. Inside the store, old Hammond himself stood behind the counter, weighing sugar for Mrs. Peterson. Both glanced up, then quickly away. Morning, Eli said. Hammond nodded, not meeting his eyes. Mr. Cutter. The strange silence persisted as Eli gathered flour, coffee, and salt. When he approached the counter, Hammond cleared his throat. Been meaning to ask, your wife in town? The question hung awkward in the air. She's gone, Eli said simply. Mrs. Peterson clutched her parcel tighter. Gone where? Just gone. Hammond busied himself tallying the items. Funny thing, she came through 2 days ago, said some troubling things. Eli set his jaw. I'm sure she did. Said you had a temper. Said you ran her off in the storm with nothing but the clothes on her back. Eli paid for his goods, careful to keep his voice level. My sons were locked outside in the snow when I returned home. You're welcome to ask them. Hammond looked uncomfortable. I'm just saying what she told folks. Said she feared for her life. And folks believed her? Eli asked, though he already knew the answer. Charlotte was beautiful, refined. She spoke like someone educated, moved like someone who belonged in drawing rooms, not drafty cabins. Of course they'd believe her. Outside, he found Sam standing rigid at the wagon, the younger boys behind him. 3 men were approaching, led by a tall figure in an expensive coat. Wendell Blackwood, one of the wealthiest men in the territory, owner of the mining company that had stripped half the mountains bare. Mr. Cutter, Blackwood said smoothly. Just the man I wanted to see. Eli stepped between the man and his sons. What can I do for you, Mr. Blackwood? It's about my sister. Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. She's quite distressed. Your sister? Charlotte. She came to me with quite a tale. Said you threw her out, threatened her. Said you've been mistreating these fine boys as well. Eli felt a cold that had nothing to do with the lingering winter. That's not what happened. She showed me the bruises, Mr. Cutter. Any bruises she has, she didn't get from me. Eli kept his voice calm, aware of how many eyes were on them now. And if you're really her brother, you'd know that. Something flickered across Blackwood's face. Are you calling my sister a liar? I'm saying she locked my children outside in a blizzard. I'm saying she's taken things that don't belong to her. And I'm saying this conversation is over. Eli turned to help the boys into the wagon, but one of Blackwood's men stepped forward, a hand on his pistol. This doesn't end here, Cutter. That land of yours has been in our sights for some time. Railroad's coming through, in case you hadn't heard. Charlotte was doing you a favor, offering to buy you out clean. Now we'll have to do it the hard way. Eli faced them again. There is no hard way. That land isn't for sale at any price. Blackwood chuckled. We'll see about that. By the way, I hear you're not a fit father for these boys. Charlotte's considering petitioning for custody, being their stepmother and all. Eli's hand itched for his revolver, but he kept it still. Not in front of the boys. Not like this. We're leaving, he said, helping Micah onto the bench. As he turned to lift Joshua, he caught sight of a young girl watching from the shadows beside the mercantile. She couldn't have been more than 14, with a threadbare dress and eyes too old for her face. She slipped a folded piece of paper into Sam's hand as the boy climbed up, then vanished into the alley. Eli took the reins, aware of Blackwood's cold smile as they pulled away. Once they were clear of town, Sam unfolded the note. "Pa," he said, voice small. "It says, 'My father fought with you. You are not alone.'" Eli took the paper, studying the neat, careful handwriting. "Did you see who gave you this?" Sam nodded. "A girl, skinny, had red hair." Eli frowned. There was only one man he'd fought alongside who had a red-haired daughter. Joseph Holloway, who'd taken a Confederate bullet meant for Eli at Gettysburg, who'd made Eli promise to look after his family if anything happened. A promise Eli had failed to keep when he lost track of them after the war. The ride home was tense, the boys quiet, Eli's mind racing. As they crested the final ridge overlooking the homestead, he noticed a lone figure on horseback watching from the tree line. When Eli raised a hand in greeting or warning, the rider turned and disappeared into the forest. "Stay in the wagon," Eli told the boys, pulling his rifle from beneath the seat. He walked toward where the rider had been, following hoof prints in the softening snow. Near a large pine, he found a piece of paper nailed to the trunk. "If you know what's good for you, hand the children over to someone who can care for them properly. That mine belongs to Blackwood." Mine? There was no mine on his land, just rocky pasture and the stream that had drawn him here after the war. Unless, Eli crushed the note in his fist. He'd heard rumors of gold in these hills, but nothing had ever come of it. If Blackwood thought there was gold here, that explained why Charlotte had appeared in church last spring, why she'd set her sights on the widower with 3 boys and a remote piece of land. It had never been about him. Or the boys, it had been about the land all along. That night, after the boys were asleep, Eli sat cleaning his rifle by lamplight, plans forming and dissolving with each stroke of the oiled cloth. He'd have to be ready for whatever came next. Blackwood wasn't known for giving up easily. A noise from the barn startled him, not the usual settling of timbers or the nickering of horses. Something else. Someone. Eli checked his revolver, making sure it was loaded, then pulled on his coat and stepped outside. The moon was bright on the fresh snow, casting long shadows from the barn and outbuildings. He moved silently, years of tracking deer, making his footfalls lighter than his size would suggest. At the barn door, he paused, listening. Another sound, breathing, quick and shallow. He raised his gun and slipped inside. "Who's there?" he called, voice low. A rustling came from the hayloft, then a small voice. "Please don't shoot." Eli kept the revolver raised. "Come down, slow." A figure descended the ladder, moonlight through the slats illuminating a thin girl in a patched dress, the same girl from town. "You gave my son that note," Eli said, lowering his gun slightly. She nodded, chin raised despite her obvious fear. "I did. My name is Ruth Holloway. Captain Joseph Holloway was my father." Eli holstered his weapon. "I knew your father. He was a good man, a brave one. He said the same about you." Her voice wavered. "Before he died, he made me memorize your name. Said if I ever needed help, I should find Elijah Cutter." "Why are you here, Ruth? Where's your mother?" The girl's shoulders slumped. "She died last winter, fever. After that, they came." "They?" "The woman, Charlotte, and her brother. They said the bank was calling in our loan. Said we'd lose everything unless we sold to them. Mother was too sick to understand what she was signing." Ruth's hands clenched into fists. "After she died, they gave me a week to clear out. Said the property belonged to Blackwood Mining now." Eli felt a cold anger settle in his chest. "And you've been following them?" Ruth nodded. "I heard them talking about you, about your land. They want it because of the gold vein that runs through these hills. They've been buying up all the properties along it, piece by piece. Your land is the last one they need." "And Charlotte? She's really Blackwood's sister?" Ruth's expression darkened. "She's not anybody's sister. She works for him, finds men with land, and..." She trailed off, glancing toward the cabin where the boys slept. "She's done this before. 3 times that I know of." Eli let that sink in. Not just a cruel woman, but a calculating one. Someone who preyed on loneliness and vulnerability. Someone who'd targeted his family deliberately. You can stay here tonight, he said finally. There's a cot in the tack room. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do. Ruth looked at him warily. They'll come for the boys. That's how they work. They'll say you're unfit, that Charlotte should have custody. Then they'll own your land free and clear. They can try, Eli said, his voice hardening, but I've fought worse than Wendell Blackwood. As they walked toward the tack room, Ruth stumbled, nearly falling. Eli caught her arm, feeling bones like a bird's beneath her sleeve. When's the last time you ate? He asked. She shrugged. Yesterday? Maybe. Eli changed course, leading her toward the cabin. Let's fix that first. Inside, he stirred the coals in the stove and set a pot of yesterday's stew to warm. Sam appeared in the doorway to the sleeping area, rubbing his eyes. Pa, what's happening? We have a guest, Eli said. This is Ruth. Her father was a friend of mine from the war. Sam studied the girl warily, then nodded. I'll get another bowl. As Ruth ate, Eli explained what she'd told him to Sam. The boy listened, face solemn beyond his years. So she never wanted to be our ma, Sam said finally. She just wanted our land. Seems that way, Eli admitted. Are they coming back for us? Eli met his son's eyes. They might try, but I won't let them take you. Not ever. Sam seemed to consider this, then turned to Ruth. Your pa saved my pa in the war? Ruth nodded. That's what my mother always said. Then you can stay with us, Sam said simply. We have room. Eli felt a surge of pride for his oldest, who'd endured so much, yet still had room for kindness. Sam's right. You'll stay until we sort this out. Before Ruth could respond, a sound outside made them all freeze. Hoofbeats, approaching fast. Eli grabbed his rifle and moved to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. A lone rider, illuminated by moonlight on snow. Not Blackwood or his men. It was Sheriff Matthew Grant, and from the way he rode, something was very wrong. Stay here, Eli told Sam and Ruth. He stepped onto the porch as Grant reined in his horse. Cutter, the sheriff called, dismounting stiffly. We need to talk. Kind of late for social calls, Sheriff. Grant's face was grim. This isn't social. Blackwood's been to see Judge Harmon. Got a temporary custody order for your boys, pending a hearing. Claims you're unstable. Dangerous. Eli felt the world tilt beneath him. That's not possible. It's more than possible. It's done. Grant handed over a folded document. You're to appear in court 3 days from now. Until then, the boys are supposed to go with Charlotte. Eli took the paper, but didn't open it. And you came to enforce this? Grant removed his hat, running a hand through graying hair. I came to warn you. Blackwood's bought half the town, including the judge. But I've known you since you settled here. You're a hard man, Cutter, but a fair one. You'd never hurt those boys. They're not taking my sons, Eli said, voice like iron. I know. That's why I rode out ahead. Blackwood's deputized 3 of his miners. They'll be here by morning with the papers. Grant glanced toward the barn. If I were you, I'd be gone before sunrise. Eli studied the sheriff's face. Why are you helping me? Because I was at Gettysburg too. Different company, but I saw what you did for Holloway and his men. A man like that doesn't suddenly become what Blackwood's claiming. Grant replaced his hat. You've got friends in Redemption Creek, whether you know it or not. But right now, you need to get those boys somewhere safe. As the sheriff turned to leave, he added, Judge Ezekiel Monroe, over in Silver Falls. He's retired now, but he knew your father. He might be your best chance at fighting this legal. Eli watched Grant ride away, the custody order heavy in his hand. Inside, Sam and Ruth waited, faces pale in the lamplight. We have to go, don't we? Sam asked. Eli nodded, mind already calculating what they'd need, where they could go. Pack only what you can carry. We leave before dawn. Ruth stood. I know a place, an old line cabin in the high country. Trappers used it, but no one goes there now. It's hidden, hard to find if you don't know where to look. How far? Eli asked. 2 days' ride, maybe 3 in snow. Eli made his decision. We'll head there first, then to Silver Falls. Get some sleep. Tomorrow will be long. As Ruth and Sam went to prepare, Eli opened the custody order, reading Blackwood's lies by lamplight. Each word stoked the fire in his chest. Charlotte claimed he'd beaten the boys, that he drank heavily, that he'd threatened her life when she tried to protect them. All lies, but lies that a bought judge would believe. Eli folded the paper and slipped it into his coat. He'd fought in a war, survived its bloodiest battles, built a life from nothing in this harsh country. He'd buried a wife, raised 3 boys alone. He wouldn't lose them now. Not to Blackwood, not to anyone. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance. Another answered, closer. Eli moved to the window, looking out at the moonlit valley. His land, his home, everything he'd worked for since the war. He might have to leave it behind, but he wouldn't let Blackwood win. Not while he still drew breath. Dawn came gray and uncertain, the first hint of light barely breaking over the eastern ridge. Eli had been awake for hours, packing supplies, saddling horses, checking and rechecking his weapons. In the cabin, Sam helped the younger boys dress, while Ruth gathered food for the journey. Take only what you need, Eli had told them. Nothing we can't carry on horseback. Now, as he secured the last of their provisions, he paused to look back at the cabin. 7 years he'd lived here. 7 years of building, planting, watching his boys grow. Sarah was buried beneath the old oak behind the barn, marked by a wooden cross he'd carved himself. It felt wrong to leave her, but he'd come back. He had to believe that. Pa? Sam stood in the doorway, Joshua and Micah behind him, all 3 dressed in their warmest clothes. We're ready. Eli nodded. Good. Ruth will ride with me. Sam, you take Joshua on your horse. Micah rides with me. As they mounted, Eli looked once more at the cabin, then at the small cross visible in the growing light. I'll be back, Sarah, he whispered. I promise. They rode north, away from Redemption Creek, following game trails that wound through dense pine forest. Ruth led the way, sure-footed, despite her youth. She'd explained that her father had taught her to track and hunt before he left for the war. Skills her mother had let her continue practicing afterward. Ma said a woman needs to know how to survive, she told Eli, especially out here. By midday, they'd put 10 miles between themselves and the homestead. Eli called a halt by a narrow stream to water the horses and eat a cold lunch of cornbread and jerky. The boys were quiet, subdued by the gravity of their situation. Only Micah asked the question, weighing on all their minds. Are we ever going home, Pa? Eli knelt beside his youngest. Yes. When this is over, we'll go home. I promise. When what's over? Micah persisted. The bad lady? Charlotte, Eli corrected gently, and her brother. They want our land, but they can't have it. We're going to make sure of that. Sam, who'd been standing lookout on a nearby rock, suddenly dropped to a crouch. Riders, he hissed, coming fast. Well, Eli was on his feet in an instant, rifle in hand. How many? 4, maybe 5. From the south. Blackwood's men. They'd found their trail faster than expected. Mount up, Eli ordered. Now. They scrambled onto their horses, Eli lifting Micah onto the saddle in front of him. Ruth pointed to a deer trail leading up a steep embankment. This way. There's a ridge where we can lose them. They spurred their horses forward, climbing rapidly through dense underbrush. Behind them, shouts echoed as the riders discovered their abandoned campsite. Cutter, a voice bellowed. We know you're out there. We just want to talk. Eli didn't slow. Talk was the last thing Blackwood's men wanted. The trail narrowed as they climbed, forcing them into single file. Ruth led, followed by Sam and Joshua, with Eli and Micah bringing up the rear. The terrain grew more treacherous. Loose shale, exposed roots, fallen trees. A shot rang out, the bullet splintering bark from a tree beside them. Down, Eli shouted, hunching over Micah protectively. Another shot, closer this time. They were gaining. The trail suddenly opened onto a broader shelf of rock, a natural lookout point overlooking the valley below. Ruth pulled up sharply. This way. She veered left, toward what appeared to be a solid wall of stone and scrub pine. Eli followed, trusting her knowledge of the terrain. As they approached, he saw what she'd been aiming for, a narrow gap between the rock face and a massive fallen pine, barely wide enough for a horse. Single file, Shuin called. Keep your head down. She disappeared into the gap. Sam followed with Joshua, ducking low to avoid overhanging branches. Eli urged his horse forward, Micah clinging to the saddle horn, eyes wide with fear. Just as they entered the passage, another shot cracked the air. Eli's horse reared, nearly throwing them both. He fought to control the animal, feeling a burning sensation across his upper arm. The bullet had grazed him. Pa, Micah cried. It's all right, Eli gritted, forcing the horse forward. Just hold on. They squeezed through the gap, emerging into a small, hidden canyon. The walls rose steep on three sides, with the narrow passage they'd used as the only obvious entrance. Ruth and Sam waited anxiously, relief washing over their faces as Eli and Micah appeared. You're hit, Sam said, pointing to Eli's sleeve, now darkening with the blood. Just a scratch. Eli dismounted carefully, lifting Micah down. Ruth, is there another way out of here? She nodded. At the back. A trail leads up and over the ridge. Horses can make it, but only in single file. They won't find it unless they know where to look. Eli nodded, tearing a strip from his bandana to bind the wound. We'll rest the horses for a few minutes, then move on. From the entrance to their hideaway, they heard the riders approaching, voices raised in frustration as they searched for the trail. They can't have disappeared. Spread out. Check every crack in the rock. Blackwood wants those kids by sunset or it's our hides. Eli motioned for silence, moving closer to the gap to listen. Maybe we should go back, one voice suggested. Tell Blackwood they headed for the territorial line. And lose our bonus? Hell no, they're up here somewhere. Another voice, deeper, more authoritative. Jenkins, take Harrison and circle west. Davis and I will check east. If you find them, fire twice. Don't engage Cutter alone. The man killed a dozen Rebs at Gettysburg with just a knife and a broken musket. Eli couldn't help the grim smile that touched his lips. His reputation from the war had grown with each telling, it seemed. What about the girl? Another voice asked. Blackwood doesn't care about her, but if she's helping Cutter, she's fair game. That wiped the smile from Eli's face. He turned to Ruth, who stood rigid, face pale but determined. We need to move, he said quietly. Now. They traveled through the afternoon and into evening, following Ruth's lead through a maze of high country that few white men had ever traversed. The trail climbed steadily, skirting alpine meadows and crossing rocky slopes. By nightfall, they'd reached a natural bowl high in the mountains, sheltered from the wind by a semicircle of towering pines. We'll camp here, Eli decided. Sam, gather firewood. Ruth, help me with the horses. As they unsaddled the animals, Eli noticed Ruth's thoughtful expression. What's on your mind? He asked. Why would they come after you so quickly? She said. Blackwood must have known you'd run. Why not wait for the court date, let you be declared in contempt? It would have given him legal standing to take the boys. Eli had been wondering the same thing. He's afraid of something. Or in a hurry. Eli nodded slowly. The railroad. If they were planning to run track through that valley, they'd need all the land secured first. Or the gold, Ruth added. If word gets out about a new strike, every prospector from here to California will flood in. Either way, it meant Blackwood was operating on a tight schedule. That could work to their advantage. Later, around a small, carefully banked fire, Eli checked his wound properly. The bullet had cut a shallow furrow across his upper arm, painful but not serious. He cleaned it with whiskey from his saddlebag, wincing at the burn. Does it hurt bad, Pa? Joshua asked, watching with wide eyes. I've had worse, Eli assured him. It was true, he still carried Confederate lead in his left thigh from Shiloh. Like when? Micah wanted to know, always hungry for stories of his father's past. Eli exchanged glances with Sam, who knew better than to ask about the war. The older boy quickly intervened. Pa, tell us about when you met Ma. You never talk about that. A safer topic, though still tender. Eli leaned back against his saddle, looking into the flames. It was after the war. I was working cattle drives up from Texas. Your mother was a school teacher in a little town called Mercy. Her wagon broke down on the trail, right in the path of 2,000 head of longhorn. I helped her move it before the herd arrived. Was it love at first sight? Joshua asked. Eli smiled faintly. Not exactly. She called me a filthy cowpuncher and said she could have fixed the wagon herself if I'd given her another 10 minutes. Sam grinned. That sounds like Ma. She was stubborn as they come, strong too. When I finished the drive, I rode back through Mercy thinking I might call on the school teacher with the fiery temper. Found her fighting off a drunk who was causing trouble at the schoolhouse. Did you punch him, Pa? Micah asked eagerly. Didn't have to. Your mother had already laid him out with a piece of stove wood by the time I got there. The boys laughed. Even Ruth smiled. For a moment, the danger felt distant. I courted her proper after that, Eli continued. Took nearly a year before she agreed to marry me. Said she had to be sure I wasn't just another drifter who'd leave when winter came. But you stayed, Sam said softly. I stayed. Eli looked at each of his sons in turn. Best decision I ever made. They sat in silence for a while, each lost in thought. Finally, Ruth spoke. My father talked about you sometimes. Said you saved his whole unit at Gettysburg. Eli shook his head. Your father saved me. Took a bullet meant for me. Before that, Ruth insisted, he said you led them out when they were trapped behind enemy lines. Said you knew the forest better than any man he'd ever met. That was a long time ago, Eli said quietly. Is that why you promised to look after us, after he died? Eli met her steady gaze. Yes, and I'm sorry I didn't. After the war, I tried to find your mother, but no one knew where she'd gone. She went back to her family in Ohio, then west again when grandfather died. We moved around a lot before settling near Redemption Creek. Ruth pulled her knees to her chest. She kept your name written down. Said if we ever needed help, we should find Elijah Cutter. The weight of that unfulfilled promise settled heavily on Eli's shoulders. I'm keeping it now, he said. You have my word. Ruth nodded, seemingly satisfied. After a while, the younger boys drifted to sleep, wrapped in blankets near the fire. Sam took first watch, rifle across his knees, looking far older than his 12 years. Eli couldn't sleep. His thoughts kept returning to Blackwood, to Charlotte, to the cruel manipulation they'd enacted. He'd been a fool to trust her, to bring her into his home, to leave his children in her care. The signs had been there, her too perfect manners, her careful questions about the land, her disinterest in the boys except when Eli was watching. But loneliness had blinded him. After 5 years alone, the prospect of companionship, of a mother for his sons, had overridden his usual caution. Ruth settled beside him, voice low to avoid waking the others. It's not your fault, she said, as if reading his thoughts. Charlotte fooled everyone. My mother, too. She has a way of making you see what you want to see. I should have known better. Why? Because you fought in a war? Because you've lived rough? Ruth shook her head. My father was the smartest man I knew, and he trusted people he shouldn't have. Said it was better to be occasionally deceived than to live without trust at all. It sounded like something Joseph would say. The man had been an idealist, even in the midst of war's brutality. Your father was a good man, Eli said. Better than me. He's the one who died. You're the one still fighting. Ruth's directness was startling. And right now, those boys need you fighting, not blaming yourself. Eli studied her in the firelight, a child with an old soul, forced to grow up too quickly. Like Sam, like so many children of the war. Get some sleep, he said finally. Long day tomorrow. They reached the line cabin late the next afternoon. It was smaller than Eli had expected, a single room with a stone fireplace, its chimney partially collapsed. But the roof was sound, the walls solid, and it was well hidden in a stand of ancient pines. Trappers built it, Ruth explained as they unsaddled the horses. Used it during winter runs. No one's been here in years. Inside was dusty but dry. A rough-hewn table, 2 benches, a platform bed frame without a mattress. Eli set the boys to sweeping, while he and Ruth gathered pine boughs for bedding. We'll stay 2 days, he decided. Rest the horses, then push on to Silver Falls. That evening, after a hot meal of rabbit stew, Sam had set snares immediately upon arrival with impressive results. Eli spread a rough map on the table. Silver Falls is here, he said, pointing. 2 days' ride if the weather holds. Judge Monroe lives outside town. If Sheriff Grant is right, the judge might help us fight Blackwood legally. And if he won't? Sam asked. Eli didn't answer immediately. The boy deserved honesty, but Eli wasn't sure what options remained if legal channels failed. He wouldn't give up his sons no matter what any court said, but life as a fugitive was no future for them. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, he said finally. For now, we focus on reaching Silver Falls safely. Later, with the boys asleep on their pine bough beds, Eli stepped outside to check the horses. The night was clear, stars brilliant in the mountain air. He had just finished adjusting a blanket on Joshua's pony when he heard a twig snap in the darkness. His hand went to his revolver. Who's there? Silence, then a voice. Just me, Mr. Cutter. Ruth emerged from the shadows, a small knife in her hand and a skinned rabbit in the other, setting more snares for tomorrow. Eli relaxed slightly, though his hand remained near his weapon. You move quiet. Pa taught me, said a noisy hunter goes hungry. She held up the rabbit. This one practically jumped into my hands. As she approached the cabin, Eli noticed how she scanned the darkness, eyes constantly moving, alert for danger. A child shouldn't have such wariness, such hard-earned caution. Your father would be proud of you, he said. Ruth's step faltered. I don't know about that. He wanted me to be a lady, like Ma, learn piano and French and how to pour tea proper. Joseph Holloway wanted you to survive, Eli corrected. Everything else was just window dressing. She considered this, then nodded. I suppose you're right. After a pause, she added, Charlotte speaks French and plays piano. She made sure everyone in town knew it. Window dressing, Eli repeated, covering up what's really underneath. Ruth smiled faintly. I like that. They returned to the cabin where Eli helped her prepare the rabbit for tomorrow's stew. As they worked in companionable silence, he found himself grateful for her presence. Not just for the practical help she provided, but for the reminder of Joseph, of promises made and kept. Some debts could never be fully repaid, but sometimes life offered second chances to Trump. The first light of dawn brought a low mist creeping through the trees. Eli woke instantly, hand reaching for his revolver before he fully registered what had disturbed him. A horse's nervous whinny from the makeshift corral. He rose silently, careful not to wake the children, and moved to the cabin's single window. Through the warped glass, he could make out shadowy figures moving among the trees. At least 3, maybe more. Blackwood's men had found them. Eli woke Sam first with a hand over the boy's mouth and a finger to his lips. Riders, he whispered. Wake the others, no noise. Sam nodded, eyes instantly alert. Eli grabbed his rifle and checked the load while Sam roused Ruth and the younger boys. Within minutes, all 5 were crouched below the window. How many? Ruth whispered. At least 3, circling, looking for tracks. How did they find us? Joshua's voice trembled. Doesn't matter now, Eli said. What matters is getting away clean. He assessed their options quickly. The cabin had only one door facing the approaching riders. The chimney was partially collapsed and too narrow for even Micah to squeeze through. They were effectively trapped. Unless, Ruth, he said quietly, is there a cellar, a root storage? She nodded. Under the bed platform. Trap door. Show me. They moved to the platform. Ruth pulled aside the pine boughs, revealing rough planks. She felt along the edge until she found a recessed iron ring, then pulled. A section of the floor lifted, exposing a dark hole beneath. It's not deep, she whispered. Just a food cache, but it might fit the boys. Eli peered into the darkness. The space was small, maybe 4 feet square and 3 feet deep, lined with stone to keep out burrowing animals. It would be tight, but the 3 boys could fit. Sam, take your brothers down there. Stay quiet no matter what happens. What about you and Ruth? Sam protested. We'll lead them away from here. Circle back when it's clear. No, Sam's voice was firm. I can shoot. I'm staying with you. Eli recognized the set of his son's jaw, the same stubborn determination Sarah had shown whenever she made up her mind. There was no time to argue. Fine, Joshua, Micah, down you go. The younger boys climbed reluctantly into the hole. Eli covered them with a few pine boughs, leaving space for air. Don't come out until one of us calls for you. Understand? They nodded, eyes wide with fear but trusting. Eli lowered the trapdoor, then replaced the remaining boughs to conceal it. Ruth, is there another way out? A window in the back? No window, but the chimney collapsed on the north side. There's a gap between the stones and the wall. Might be big enough to squeeze through. Outside, voices grew closer. They were running out of time. Sam, take Ruth and go through that gap. Get to the horses if you can. If not, head uphill into the rocks. I'll create a distraction. What kind of distraction? Ruth asked. Eli checked his rifle one final time. The loud kind. Sam clutched his arm. Pa, no, come with us. I'll be right behind you. Eli gripped his son's shoulder. I promise. Now go." With obvious reluctance, Sam followed Ruth to the partially collapsed chimney. Eli watched them squeeze through the narrow gap between stone and timber, disappearing into the misty forest beyond. Then he positioned himself beside the door, rifle ready. Through a crack in the weathered wood, he could see three men approaching cautiously, weapons drawn. Not Blackwood himself, but his hired guns, the same men who had pursued them from the homestead. "Cabin looks occupied," one said. "Smoke from last night's fire." "Cutter," another called. "We know you're in there. Come out peaceful-like. We just want the boys, not you." Eli remained silent, calculating angles, distances. If he could draw them away from the cabin, away from the boys' hiding place, Sam and Ruth might have a chance to circle around to the horses. "Last chance, Cutter," the man shouted, "or we come in shooting." Eli took a deep breath, then kicked the door open and fired in one fluid motion. His first shot caught the nearest man in the shoulder, spinning him around. His second struck another's leg. The third man dove for cover as Eli sprinted from the cabin, firing twice more to keep their heads down. He ran straight into the forest, away from the direction Sam and Ruth had taken, drawing the pursuit after him. Bullets splintered bark around him as he zigzagged between trees. One of the men was shouting orders, reorganizing after the surprise attack. Eli ducked behind a massive pine trunk, waiting until the crashing footsteps drew closer, then fired again. A cry of pain told him he'd hit his mark. Two down, at least temporarily. But the third man was smarter, more cautious. Eli caught glimpses of him circling, using cover, working his way around to flank Eli's position. A professional, not some mining camp tough, but someone who knew how to fight. Eli retreated deeper into the forest, leading the man farther from the cabin. The mist worked to his advantage, obscuring movement, muffling sound. He crossed a small stream, climbed a rocky embankment, then doubled back, becoming the hunter rather than the hunted. The man appeared below, moving carefully along Eli's trail. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a military bearing that confirmed Eli's suspicions. Another veteran, but from which side? "I know what you're doing, Cutter," the man called, voice carrying in the still morning air. "Drawing us away from the kids. Noble but pointless. Blackwood's got 20 men combing these mountains. You can't hide forever." Eli remained silent, shifting position slightly for a better angle. "For what it's worth," the man continued, "I don't like using children as pawns. But Blackwood's paying gold, and a man's got to eat." He was directly below Eli now, unaware of the danger above him. Eli could end it with one shot. Clean, quick, one less threat to his family. His finger tightened on the trigger. The man stopped suddenly, head tilting as if listening. Then he looked up, straight into Eli's eyes. "You won't shoot," he said calmly. "Not in cold blood, not after Gettysburg." Eli froze. "What do you know about Gettysburg?" "I was there. Different uniform, but same hell." The man lowered his rifle slightly. "Name's Daniel Burke, 12th Virginia. You're a long way from home, rebel." Burke shrugged. "No home to go back to. War saw to that." Eli kept his rifle trained on the man's chest. "Why are you working for Blackwood?" "Told you. He pays gold, but I draw the line at hurting children." Burke slowly set his rifle down. "I'll tell the others you went north. Buy you some time." Eli didn't lower his weapon. "Why would you do that?" "Because at Gettysburg, when your boys had my company pinned down by that stone wall, you let the wounded surrender. Could have killed us all, but you didn't." Burke met his gaze steadily. "One debt deserves another." Eli considered the man, weighing sincerity against the possibility of a trap, but there was something in Burke's eyes, a weariness, a resignation, that rang true. "How many men does Blackwood really have looking for us?" "8, including me, split into 3 groups." Burke glanced over his shoulder. "Jenkins and Davis are down but not out. They'll regroup soon." "And Blackwood? Where is he?" "Silver Falls. Set up camp outside town 2 days ago. Seems mighty interested in some retired judge who lives there." "Judge Monroe." Blackwood was already moving to cut off their escape route. "What does he want with my boys?" Eli demanded. "The truth." Burke hesitated. "It's not about the boys. Never was. It's about the land. There's gold there, sure, but something else too. Something Blackwood found in some old survey maps. What? Don't know exactly. But whatever it is, he's willing to burn down half the territory to get it. Burke picked up his rifle slowly. You should know, that woman, Charlotte, she's not his sister. Never was. She's worked this scheme with him before. I figured that much, Eli said grimly. She's dangerous, Cutter. More than Blackwood in her way. Burke backed up a step. I've said my piece. I'll lead the others north. Can't promise how long before they figure it out. Eli kept his rifle raised. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't, Burke said simply. But you don't have much choice. With that, he turned and walked away, calling out as he went, Found tracks, heading north toward the ridge. Eli watched until he disappeared into the mist, then quickly made his way back toward the cabin. Whether Burke was telling the truth or setting a trap remained to be seen, but Eli couldn't afford to waste time wondering. He circled wide, approaching the cabin from the rear. No sign of Jenkins or Davis. They must have followed Burke. The horses were gone from their makeshift corral. Either Sam and Ruth had taken them, or Blackwood's men had. Eli crept to the collapsed chimney, peering through the gap. The cabin appeared empty. He squeezed through, rifle first, scanning for threats. Joshua? Micah? He called softly. No response. He moved to the bed platform and lifted the trap door. Empty. Cold fear gripped him. Had Blackwood's men found the hidden cellar? Had the boys tried to follow him? Pa! The whispered call came from outside. Eli spun, rifle raised, then lowered it immediately. Sam stood in the doorway, tense but unharmed. The horses, the boy said urgently. Ruth has them hidden up the ridge. But we need to go now. There are more riders coming. Your brothers? With Ruth. They're scared, but all right. Relief flooded through Eli. He clasped Sam's shoulder briefly, then followed him outside. True to the boy's word, hoofbeats echoed in the distance, approaching fast. They ran uphill, away from the cabin, into a tumble of massive boulders. Ruth waited there with Joshua and Micah, the horses tethered in a natural stone enclosure hidden from below. More of Blackwood's men, she said without preamble. At least 5, coming from the east. Eli did the calculation quickly. 3 he'd encountered, plus 5 more. That accounted for the 8 Burke had mentioned, if the man had been telling the truth. Mount up, he ordered. We ride west, then swing south towards Silver Falls. Stay in the trees as much as possible. As they prepared to leave, Micah suddenly clutched Eli's arm. Pa, look! Following the boy's pointing finger, Eli saw smoke rising from the direction of the cabin. Blackwood's men had set it ablaze. They're trying to flush us out, Ruth said. Or send a message, Eli replied grimly. Either way, we're not sticking around to find out which. They rode hard through the morning, pushing the horses as much as they dared on the treacherous mountain trails. By midday, they'd put considerable distance between themselves and their pursuers. But Eli knew it wouldn't last. Blackwood's men would pick up their trail eventually. And Blackwood himself waited in Silver Falls, their only hope for legal recourse. They paused in a sheltered ravine to rest the horses and eat a hasty meal of jerky and dried apples. Eli studied the crude map he'd drawn, trying to plot the safest route to Judge Monroe's home without passing through Silver Falls itself. Pa, Sam said, interrupting his thoughts. One of the men at the cabin, I heard him say something about Charlotte. Eli looked up sharply. What about her? He said she was waiting at the old Richardson place, and that Blackwood wanted the boys delivered there, not to town. The Richardson place, Eli knew it, an abandoned homestead about 5 miles outside Silver Falls. Once a prosperous farm, now derelict since old man Richardson died in 82 or 83. Did he say why? Sam shook his head. Just that she was getting impatient. Eli frowned. What was Charlotte's game? If Blackwood had legal papers, why not simply wait in town for the sheriff to deliver the boys? Unless the papers wouldn't stand up to real scrutiny, unless they needed to get the boys away quickly before anyone could question their claim. Change of plans, Eli announced. We're going to the Richardson place. Ruth stared at him. Isn't that where they're waiting for us? It's exactly where they're waiting for us, Eli confirmed, which means it's the last place they'll expect us to go willingly. Pa, that's crazy, Sam protested. They'll catch us for sure. No, Eli said, a plan forming in his mind. They won't catch us, because we're going to catch them first. The Richardson place stood in a small valley of its own, sheltered by cottonwoods and bordered by a lazy creek. Once, it had been the pride of the county, a sprawling farmhouse with a barn, corral, and several outbuildings. Now the buildings sagged. The fences had collapsed, and the once neat fields had returned to prairie grass and wild rose. Eli, Sam, Ruth, and the younger boys crouched in a stand of pines overlooking the property. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard, where 4 horses stood tethered to a broken hitching post. Smoke curled from the farmhouse chimney. Someone's definitely there, Eli murmured, studying the scene through his field glass. I count 2 men on the porch, armed. Charlotte? Ruth asked. Can't see inside, but those are Blackwood's men, same as the ones who chased us from the cabin. Sam pointed to a small outbuilding near the creek. What's that? Eli adjusted his focus. Springhouse for keeping milk and butter cool. It looks solid, Sam observed, and it's away from the main house. Eli nodded, understanding his son's thinking. Good place to hole up while we scout. They retreated into the trees to plan. The day was waning, darkness only a few hours away. That would work to their advantage. Blackwood's men would be watching the roads, expecting them to approach from the main trail if they came at all. Ruth, you stay with Joshua and Micah in the spring house, Eli instructed. Sam and I will circle around after dark, see what we're dealing with. I want to help, Ruth protested. I can shoot. I know you can, but I need someone I trust with the boys. Eli's tone made it clear the matter was settled. They waited until the first purple shadows of dusk before moving down to the creek, using its banks as cover. The spring house was just as Sam had guessed, small but sturdy, with stone walls and a heavy wooden door. Inside, the air was cool and damp, with a central trough where spring water still flowed clear over stone. Stay here, Eli told Ruth and the younger boys. No matter what you hear, don't come out unless Sam or I call for you. Ruth nodded grimly, her hand resting on the pistol Eli had given her, a small derringer, but deadly enough at close range. Be careful, Joshua whispered, hugging his father tightly. Always am, Eli assured him, ruffling his hair. He turned to Sam. Ready? The boy nodded, checking his rifle with the steady hands of someone twice his age. The past days had aged him, forced him to grow in ways Eli both admired and regretted. They slipped out into the gathering darkness, moving silently along the creek, then up through a stand of willows that approached the back of the farmhouse. Lamplight glowed in the windows, casting yellow rectangles onto the overgrown yard. Voices carried on the evening air. Eli and Sam crept closer, staying low in the tall grass until they could make out the words. Should have been back by now, a man was saying, his voice tense. Burke knows these mountains. If anyone could find them, it's him. Unless Cutter got to him first, another replied. Man's got a reputation. Reputation, a woman's voice scoffed. Charlotte. He's just a broken-down soldier with a talent for looking pitiful. That's how he tricked half the territory into thinking he's some upstanding citizen. Eli felt Sam tense beside him. He placed a restraining hand on the boy's shoulder. Well, your pitiful soldier has managed to evade our best men for 3 days, the first man pointed out. And now Wendell's breathing down our necks because the judge is asking questions. My brother knows how to handle small-town judges, Charlotte said dismissively. By tomorrow night, those brats will be legally in my custody, and Cutter will be on the run as a kidnapper. All we need is for Burke to deliver them. And if he doesn't? A pause. Then we go with the second plan. Draw Cutter out. How? Man's not stupid enough to walk into a trap. Charlotte's laugh held no warmth. He will if he thinks his precious boys are in danger. Wendell's bringing something from town that will guarantee it. Eli had heard enough. He tugged Sam's sleeve, and they backed away carefully, returning to the creek before speaking. They're waiting for this man, Burke, Sam whispered. The one who was supposed to find us. Eli nodded, thinking of the Confederate soldier he'd encountered at the cabin. Had Burke betrayed them after all? Or was he playing both sides? We need to know what Blackwood's bringing from town, Eli decided, and we need to get a message to Judge Monroe before Charlotte and Blackwood can turn him against us. How? We can't go into Silver Falls without being spotted. Eli considered. There's a back trail to Monroe's place. Old logging road that runs along the ridge. Hardly used now, but I remember it from before the war. You've been to his house? Once with my father, when I was about your age. Eli hadn't thought of that day in years. His father, a respected surveyor, had business with the then practicing Judge Monroe. Young Eli had been impressed by the judge's library, his dignified manner, the way he'd spoken to a boy as if his thoughts mattered. I'll go tonight, Eli decided. You stay with Ruth and your brothers. No, Sam's voice was firm. We stay together. You said so yourself. Eli studied his son's face in the dim light. The boy was right, splitting up was risky, but so was bringing the younger children within reach of Blackwood and Charlotte. We'll all go, he conceded. But first, I want to know what Blackwood's bringing that has Charlotte so confident. They circled back toward the farmhouse, this time approaching from the side where a broken-down wagon provided cover near an open window. Lamplight spilled out, along with the continued conversation. Sure it will work? One of the men was asking. It worked on the others, Charlotte replied. These mountain people are all the same. Sentimental fools. Show them a piece of paper with an official seal, and they'll believe anything you tell them. Cutter's different, the man persisted. He's educated, fought in the war. He won't be easy to fool. That's why we have insurance. The sound of liquid being poured into a glass. Wendell's bringing the special deed, the one with the governor's seal. A forgery? A very good one. Good enough to convince that doddering old fool Monroe. And once he rules in our favor, the boys become my legal wards. Their land becomes my land. And Elijah Cutter becomes a wanted man if he tries to interfere. Eli felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. So that was their game. Forged documents to sway the judge, to steal not just his sons, but his land as well. But why? What made his particular homestead so valuable that Blackwood would go to such lengths? A new voice joined the conversation. Younger, female, not Charlotte. Ma'am, the men are back. Burke's not with them. What? Charlotte's voice sharpened. Where is he? Jenkins says they got separated in the mountains. Says Burke was tracking Cutter north when they lost him. A pause, then the sound of something shattering. A glass thrown against a wall. Useless, Charlotte hissed. All of you. How hard can it be to find one man and 3 children in these godforsaken mountains? Ma'am, the younger voice again, hesitant. There's something else. A girl was with them. Red hair. Jenkins recognized her from town. The Holloway brat, Charlotte said flatly. I should have known. Wendell said we should have dealt with her when we took her mother's property. Eli felt Sam tense beside him again. This time he shared the boy's anger. Not content with stealing from widows and orphans, Blackwood and Charlotte had considered murder as well. What now? One of the men asked. Now we wait for Wendell, Charlotte replied, her voice cold and controlled once more. He'll be here by morning with the papers. Then we proceed as planned. Judge Monroe will see things our way, or he'll find himself facing ruin. Wendell has enough on that old man to bury him twice over. So Monroe was being blackmailed as well. Eli's last hope for legal recourse was crumbling before it even began. And Cutter, the man pressed, if he's stupid enough to show his face, kill him. The law won't look too hard at a kidnapper's death. Charlotte's voice hardened. But I want those boys alive and unharmed. They're the key to everything. Eli had heard enough. He signaled to Sam, and they retreated into the darkness, making their way back to the spring house where Ruth waited with the younger boys. Inside the small stone building, Eli quickly related what they'd overheard. Forged deeds, blackmail. Ruth's eyes widened. They really are willing to do anything. But why? Sam asked. What's so special about our land? Eli shook his head. I don't know, something Blackwood found on old survey maps, according to Burke. We need to warn Judge Monroe, before Blackwood gets to him with those fake papers. We will, tonight. Eli checked his watch, nearly 10 o'clock. Silver Falls is 3 hours' ride. If we leave now, we can reach Monroe's place before dawn. And then what? Sam asked. If they're blackmailing him, he might not help us even if we tell him the truth. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Eli said, though privately he shared his son's concern. If Monroe was compromised, their options were dwindling rapidly. They prepared to leave, mounting their horses quietly and following the creek away from the Richardson place. The night was clear, stars providing just enough light to navigate by. Eli led them on a circuitous route that avoided the main roads, cutting through pine forests and skirting rocky outcroppings. As they rode, Eli's mind worked through their dwindling options. If Monroe couldn't or wouldn't help, they'd have to flee the territory entirely. Start over somewhere new, somewhere Blackwood's influence didn't reach. But that meant abandoning Sarah's grave, the home he'd built for his sons, everything they'd worked for since the war. And there was no guarantee Blackwood wouldn't follow. Whatever made the land so valuable would still be there, still drawing his greed like a magnet. No, running wasn't the answer. Somehow they had to stand and fight, but on their terms, not Blackwood's. The trail narrowed as they climbed, forcing them into single file. Eli led, with Sam behind him, then Ruth with Micah, and Joshua bringing up the rear on his pony. The boy had insisted he could manage on his own, and Eli had relented, recognizing the same need for independence he'd seen in Sam at that age. They had just crested a ridge when Eli heard it, the distant sound of hoofbeats. Multiple riders approaching fast from the direction they'd come. "Riders," he warned, pulling up. "Get off the trail, into the trees." They dismounted quickly, leading the horses into a dense stand of pines. The sounds grew louder, 5 or 6 horses at least, moving at a gallop despite the darkness and treacherous terrain. "They must have discovered we were there," Ruth whispered. "Listening," Eli nodded grimly. "Someone must have spotted them retreating or found their tracks. Either way, Blackwood's men were in pursuit once more." "Change of plans," he said quietly. "We can't outrun them to Silver Falls. They know these trails as well as we do." "What do we do?" Joshua asked, eyes wide with fear. Eli made a quick decision. "We split up." "No," Sam protested immediately. "Listen to me," Eli insisted. "Ruth will take you and your brothers to Judge Monroe's. I'll lead these riders away, give you time to reach him safely." "It's too dangerous," Ruth objected. "There are too many of them. Which is why I need to draw them off. They want me more than they want you." Eli's tone left no room for argument. "Ruth, you remember the map I showed you, the logging road that leads to Monroe's property?" She nodded reluctantly. "Follow it. Stay off the main trails. Tell Monroe everything about Charlotte, the forged deeds, all of it. Show him the custody papers they served me." "What if he doesn't believe us?" Sam asked. "Make him believe you." Eli placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "You're a cutter. Stand your ground." The hoofbeats were closer now, maybe a mile away at most. Time was running out. "Pa, please," Micah begged, tears in his eyes. "Don't leave us." Eli knelt, pulling his youngest into a fierce embrace. "I'm not leaving you, son. I'm protecting you. There's a difference." He looked at each of them in turn. "I will find you. No matter what happens, I will find you." With that, he mounted his horse and handed the reins of Joshua's pony to Ruth. "Go, now. Don't stop until you reach Monroe's." Sam grabbed his father's stirrup. "Promise you'll come back." "I promise." Eli squeezed his son's hand, then turned his horse toward the trail. "Now go." He waited just long enough to see them disappear into the trees on the other side of the ridge, then spurred his horse back the way they'd come. He'd give the pursuers something to chase, and with luck, buy his family the time they needed. Eli rode hard, making no attempt to conceal his trail. When he reached a fork in the path, he deliberately took the one leading away from Silver Falls, toward the higher peaks. Behind him, the sounds of pursuit grew closer. Good. They were following him, not his sons. The trail climbed steeply, switchbacking up a rocky slope. In daylight, it would have been treacherous enough. In darkness, it was nearly suicidal. But Eli knew these mountains, had hunted them for years. His horse was sure-footed, bred for this terrain. Still, he couldn't maintain this pace forever. The animal was already breathing hard, foam flecking its neck. He needed to find a defensible position, somewhere to make a stand. As the trail crested a ridge, Eli spotted what he needed: a tumble of massive boulders, weathered by centuries of wind and rain into a natural fortress. He urged his mount toward it, sliding from the saddle when he reached the rocks. "Go on, boy," he whispered, slapping the horse's flank. The animal snorted, then trotted away into the darkness. With luck, the pursuers would follow its tracks, giving Eli time to prepare. He scrambled up the boulders, finding a natural notch that provided both cover and a clear view of the trail below. His Winchester rifle had 14 rounds in the magazine, plus the 6 in his Colt revolver. 20 shots against how many men? 6, from the sound of the hoofbeats. Not great odds, but he'd faced worse at Gettysburg. The riders appeared minutes later, dark shapes against the starlit trail. They slowed, seeing the horses' tracks leading away. "Spread out," one ordered. "He's trying to throw us off." Eli recognized the voice. Jenkins, one of the men from the cabin. The one Burke had supposedly led north on a false trail. Clearly, that ruse hadn't lasted long. The men dismounted, rifles ready. 3 moved to follow the horses' tracks, while 3 others began searching the area around the boulders. They were professionals. Eli had to give them that. Not the usual mining camp toughs, but men who knew how to track, how to fight. "Cutter," Jenkins called. "We know you're up there. Make this easy on yourself." Eli remained silent, sighting down his rifle at the man. "Your boys are already caught," Jenkins continued. "Blackwood's men picked them up an hour ago. There's no point in fighting." A lie designed to make him reveal his position. Eli didn't fall for it. "Last chance, Cutter. Throw down your weapons or the Holloway girl dies first." That gave Eli pause. How did they know Ruth was with them? Had they somehow tracked the others after all? No, another lie. They were fishing, trying to provoke a reaction. One of the searchers moved closer to Eli's position, scanning the rocks. Eli held his breath, waiting. The man passed directly below his hiding spot, unaware of the danger above. Then a loose stone shifted beneath Eli's boot, clattering down the rock face. The man looked up, eyes widening. "Here, he's—" Eli's shot cut him off mid-shout, the bullet taking him in the shoulder. Not a kill shot. Eli avoided those when possible, but enough to put the man out of the fight. Instantly, the night erupted in gunfire. Bullets pinged off the rocks around Eli as he ducked deeper into his hiding place. He returned fire methodically, aiming at movement rather than shadows. Another man fell, clutching his leg. The remaining 4 took cover, settling in for a siege. "You're just making it harder on yourself," Jenkins shouted. "There's nowhere to go, Cutter." Eli conserved his ammunition, firing only when he had a clear shot. One more man down, this one hit in the arm. 3 left, including Jenkins, but his position was becoming untenable. They were working their way around the boulders, attempting to flank him. Soon they'd have him in a crossfire, with no escape. A bullet grazed his cheek, hot and sudden. Another tore through his coat sleeve. They were getting closer, more accurate. Eli knew he had to move. Staying meant certain death. But every direction offered only more exposed rock, more clear lines of fire. Then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Not gunfire, not voices, but the distant crack of a branch breaking. Someone else was approaching, moving carefully through the trees behind the boulders. Blackwood's reinforcements? Or something else? Eli didn't have time to wonder. A new volley of shots forced him deeper into the rocks, nearly pinned now. His ammunition was running low, his options dwindling. Then suddenly gunfire erupted from the trees, not aimed at Eli, but at Jenkins and his men. Caught in the crossfire, 2 more fell immediately. Jenkins dove for cover, shouting in confusion. "Who the hell?" His question was cut short by another shot, this one dropping him where he stood. Silence fell, broken only by the moans of the wounded. Eli kept his rifle trained on the trees, waiting. "Cutter?" a voice called. "You still alive up there?" Eli recognized it immediately. "Burke?" The Confederate soldier emerged from the shadows, rifle lowered but ready. "Told you I'd lead them north. Didn't expect you to circle back south so soon." "What are you doing here?" Eli demanded, not lowering his weapon. "Saving your hide, from the looks of it." Burke glanced at the fallen men. "Jenkins never was too bright. Told him you'd gone north, but he insisted on checking the southern trails anyway." "Why help me?" Burke shrugged. "Told you, one debt deserves another." Eli studied the man, still suspicious. "Blackwood pays better than my gratitude." "True enough, but some things can't be bought." Burke slung his rifle over his shoulder. "Your boys made it to Silver Palnison. I saw them on the trail about an hour back, heading for Monroe's place." Relief flooded through Eli, quickly followed by fresh concern. "Blackwood's on his way there too. with forged documents. I know. Heard Charlotte talking before I left. That's why I came looking for you. Burke's expression turned grim. There's something you need to know about that land of yours, Cutter. Something Blackwood found in old Army survey maps. What? It's not just gold, it's what the gold sits on. Burke hesitated. When the railroad was surveying routes, they discovered your valley sits at the only viable pass through those mountains, the only place a train can go through without tunneling for miles. Eli frowned. There are a dozen passes through those hills. Not for a train. The grades are too steep, the turns too sharp. Your land is the key to the whole northern route. Burke checked his rifle absently. Blackwood's been buying up land all along the proposed route. Yours is the last piece he needs. And Charlotte? Where does she fit in? She's his fiancée, not his sister. They've worked this scheme before. She marries a landowner, establishes legal claim, then they force him out one way or another. Burke's mouth twisted. Usually the husband doesn't survive the process. A chill ran through Eli that had nothing to do with the mountain air. If he hadn't returned early that day, if he hadn't found his sons locked out in the snow, would he have met with an accident soon after? Why are you telling me this? He asked. Because I've done things I'm not proud of for Blackwood, but I draw the line at harming children, or standing by while a man gets robbed of his family. Burke glanced at the wounded men. They'll live, but they won't be following us anytime soon. We should go if you want to reach Monroe's before Blackwood does. Eli hesitated only briefly. Burke had just saved his life, and his information rang true. Sometimes in war and its aftermath, you had to trust unlikely allies. My horse ran off, he said, climbing down from the rocks. Caught him about a quarter-mile back, Burke replied. He's tethered with mine. They moved quickly through the darkness, leaving Jenkins and his men to tend their wounds. As promised, both horses waited in a small clearing. Eli checked his mount, then swung into the saddle. Silver Falls is still 3 hours away, he said, and that's pushing hard. Burke nodded grimly. Then we push harder. Blackwood left Redemption Creek yesterday afternoon. He'll reach Monroe's by morning. They rode in silence for a time, each man lost in his thoughts. Finally, Eli spoke the question that had been gnawing at him. What does Blackwood have on Judge Monroe? Charlotte mentioned blackmail. Burke's expression darkened. During the war, Monroe's son joined the Confederate Army against his father's wishes. He was captured at Antietam, facing execution as a spy. Monroe used his connections to get the boy transferred to a regular POW camp instead. That's hardly blackmail material. Many families had sons on both sides. There's more. To secure the transfer, Monroe provided information. Union troop movements, supply routes, nothing that changed the course of the war, but enough to be called treason if it came to light. Eli absorbed this, and Blackwood knows. Blackwood makes it his business to know every man's weakness. It's how he's built his empire. Burke's voice held undisguised contempt. He collects secrets, like other men collect gold. They pushed their horses hard, following the logging road Ruth had taken with the boys. Eli prayed they had reached Monroe safely, that the judge would help them despite Blackwood's hold over him. But as dawn broke over the eastern mountains, Eli's hopes dimmed. Ahead, smoke rose from the direction of Silver Falls, not the usual morning cookfires, but a larger blaze. Burke saw it too. That's coming from Monroe's property. They spurred their tired mounts to a final effort, cresting a rise that overlooked the judge's estate. What they saw stopped them cold. The main house was engulfed in flames, orange and yellow against the pale morning sky. Figures moved around it, men with rifles, horses standing ready, and in the courtyard, a scene that turned Eli's blood to ice. Charlotte stood beside a black carriage, one hand firmly gripping Micah's shoulder. Nearby, Sam struggled in the grip of two men, while Joshua stood frozen beside Ruth, who appeared to be unconscious on the ground. And overseeing it all, resplendent in his expensive coat, was Wendell Blackwood himself. We're too late, Burke muttered. Eli felt something break inside him, not hope, but restraint. The careful control he'd maintained since finding his sons in the snow, the measured responses, the attempts to solve this legally. All of it shattered at the sight of his children in the hands of the people who had tried to destroy them. No, he said, checking his rifle. We're right on time. Burke glanced at him, recognizing the cold fury in his voice. That's at least 10 armed men down there, Cutter, plus Blackwood and Charlotte. Even with the two of us, those odds, I don't care about the odds. Eli's voice was deadly calm. Those are my sons, and I made them a promise. He urged his horse forward, down toward the burning house and the final confrontation with Wendell Blackwood. Burke grabbed Eli's reins, halting his horse. Wait, charging in blind will get you killed, and your boys with you. Eli's hand tightened on his rifle, eyes never leaving the scene below. Let go. Think, man. Burke's voice was urgent but low. Blackwood doesn't want the boys dead. He wants them as leverage. That gives us time. The logic penetrated Eli's rage. He drew a deep breath, forcing himself to assess the situation tactically rather than emotionally. Below, Blackwood was gesturing to his men, directing some toward the burning house, while others maintained their grip on Sam. Charlotte stood slightly apart, one hand still firmly on Micah's shoulder, the other holding what appeared to be a bundle of papers. Judge Monroe was nowhere to be seen. Where's the judge? Eli muttered. Burke pointed to a figure being loaded into the black carriage. An elderly man slumped between two guards. There, looks like they're taking him with them. Why, if they've already forced him to sign whatever papers they needed? Insurance, maybe. Or there's something else they need from him. Burke scanned the scene. We need to get closer, hear what they're saying. Eli nodded reluctantly. As much as every instinct screamed at him to charge in, Burke was right. They needed information. They dismounted, securing their horses in a stand of pine, then worked their way down the slope on foot. The terrain offered good cover. Rocks, trees, the occasional gully. They approached from the east, using the smoke from the burning house to mask their movement. Within 50 yards of the courtyard, they could hear Blackwood's voice, carrying clearly in the morning air. Load them all in the wagons, he was ordering. The boys in the carriage with me and Charlotte. The girl and the judge in the supply wagon. And hurry, I want to be back at the Richardson place by noon. What about the papers, sir? One of his men asked. If the house burns, Charlotte has the deed, signed and sealed. Everything else can burn. Blackwood's tone was dismissive. The old man served his purpose. Sam's voice rose in protest. You can't do this. My pa will. The sharp crack of a slap silenced him. Eli's hand tightened on his rifle, but Burke's warning grip on his arm held him back. Your father, Blackwood said coldly, is likely dead by now. Jenkins and his men had orders to ensure it. You're lying, Sam spat. Pa's smarter than all of you put together. Charlotte stepped forward, still gripping Micah, who was crying silently. Such loyalty. Your father didn't deserve it, you know. He was weak, pathetic, a broken man hiding in the mountains because he couldn't face the real world anymore. Shut up, Sam lunged at her, only to be yanked back by his captors. You don't know anything about him. I know enough, Charlotte smiled thinly. I know he was so desperate for a woman's touch, he never questioned why I chose him. Never wondered why someone like me would settle for a widower with 3 brats in a drafty cabin. Eli felt Burke tense beside him. We need to move, the Confederate whispered. They're loading them up. Indeed, the men were forcing Sam toward the carriage, while others lifted Ruth's unconscious form into a supply wagon. Judge Monroe was already inside, his white head visible through the canvas flap. Circle around to the wagons, Eli instructed. When I create a distraction, get Ruth and the judge out. I'll go for the boys. Burke nodded grimly. What's the distraction? Eli's eyes fell on the stables at the far end of the courtyard. You'll know it when you see it. They separated, Burke moving silently toward the supply wagons, while Eli crept closer to the stables. Inside, horses nickered nervously, agitated by the smoke and commotion. A plan formed in his mind, dangerous but potentially effective. He reached the stable door undetected, slipping inside. 6 horses occupied the stalls, stomping and tossing their heads. Eli moved quickly, opening each stall door, then pausing at the rear entrance to the stable. There he found what he needed, a pile of dry hay and a lantern. Taking a deep breath, he knocked the lantern over. The oil spilled, flames catching the hay immediately. Then he ran back through the stable, slapping the horses' flanks, driving them toward the open doors. The animals needed little encouragement. Panicked by the sudden fire, they bolted out into the courtyard, neighing wildly, scattering Blackwood's men in all directions. In the ensuing chaos, Eli sprinted toward the carriage where his sons were being held. He saw Burke taking advantage of the distraction, moving toward the supply wagon where Ruth and the judge were imprisoned. Blackwood was shouting orders, trying to regain control of the situation. Charlotte stood frozen, momentarily releasing her grip on Micah. It was all the opening Eli needed. "Joshua! Micah, run!" he bellowed, firing his rifle into the air. 3 heads snapped around at the sound of their father's voice. Sam reacted instantly, driving an elbow into his captor's stomach, then grabbing Joshua's hand. Micah, freed from Charlotte's grasp, raced toward his brothers. Eli provided covering fire, forcing Blackwood's men to duck for cover rather than pursue the boys. He saw them running toward the trees where he'd emerged just as he'd hoped. "Stop them!" Blackwood roared. "Shoot Cutter, but don't harm those boys!" Bullets whistled past Eli as he dove behind an overturned cart. Across the courtyard, Burke had reached the supply wagon and was cutting Ruth's bonds. The judge was already free, though he moved with the stiffness of an elderly man roughly handled. Charlotte, recovered from her surprise, was drawing a derringer from her sleeve. But she wasn't aiming at Eli. Her eyes tracked the fleeing boys, the small pistol raised. "No!" Eli shouted, breaking cover to charge toward her. A shot rang out. Charlotte staggered, the derringer falling from her fingers. She looked down in shock at the red stain spreading across her bodice, then raised bewildered eyes to Blackwood, who stood 20 feet away, his own pistol still smoking. "Wendell?" she gasped, her voice small and confused. "You fool," Blackwood snarled. "I need those boys alive for the deed to be valid." Charlotte crumpled to the ground as Eli reached her. For a moment their eyes met, hers wide with shock and betrayal, his hard with the memory of his sons shivering in the snow. "He'll betray you too," she whispered, blood bubbling at her lips. "Just like all the others." Then she was gone, eyes staring sightlessly at the smoke-filled sky. Eli didn't pause to reflect. He snatched up her fallen derringer and rolled behind a water trough as Zora's bullets splintered the wood around him. Blackwood was shouting new orders, reorganizing his men. "Find those boys, bring them back here, and someone kill that interfering bastard." Across the courtyard, Burke had succeeded in freeing Ruth and the judge. They were making their way toward the cover of the trees, moving awkwardly due to the judge's age and Ruth's still groggy state. Eli needed to buy them time, and he needed to reach his sons. He counted his remaining ammunition: 4 rounds in the rifle, 2 in his revolver, 2 in Charlotte's derringer. Not enough for a protracted fight against Blackwood's remaining men, but perhaps enough for what he needed to do. Taking careful aim, he fired at the carriage horses. Not to kill, he abhorred hurting animals unnecessarily, but to startle them into motion. The bullet struck the ground near their hooves, causing them to rear and bolt, dragging the carriage away in a wild, careening path that scattered more of Blackwood's men. With the enemy's attention divided, Eli made his move, sprinting from cover to cover toward the tree line where his sons had disappeared. Bullets kicked up dirt around him, but none found their mark. He reached the trees, diving into the underbrush just as a volley of shots splintered bark above his head. "Pa!" Sam's voice somewhere to his right. Eli crawled toward the sound, finding his 3 sons huddled behind a fallen log. He gathered them close, checking quickly for injuries. "Are you hurt? Any of you?" They shook their heads, eyes wide with fear, but also relief. "I knew you'd come," Micah said, small arms wrapping around Eli's neck. "I promised, didn't I?" Eli managed a smile, though his heart was still racing. "Now we need to move. Follow me and stay low." They crept through the underbrush, away from the burning estate, toward the spot where Eli had left the horses. Behind them, Blackwood's voice carried, ordering his men to search the woods. "What about Ruth?" Sam asked as they moved. "And the judge?" "Burke's getting them out," Eli replied, hoping it was true. He'd seen them heading for the trees, but in a different direction than his own escape route. "Who's Burke?" Joshua whispered. "A friend." The word felt strange on Eli's tongue, applied to a former enemy. But in this moment, it was true enough. They reached the horses without incident, finding Burke already there with Ruth and Judge Monroe. The judge looked pale and shaken, but his eyes lit with recognition when he saw Eli. Cutter, he said, voice weak but dignified. Joseph Cutter's boy. Yes, sir, helped his sons mount. Turned to the judge. Can you ride? Monroe nodded grimly. Been riding since before you were born, young man. It'll take more than Wendell Blackwood's thugs to keep me off a horse. Despite everything, Eli felt a smile tug at his lips. The old man had spirit. Burke helped Ruth onto his own horse, then swung up behind her. We need to move. Blackwood's men will find our trail soon enough. Where to? Eli asked, mounting his own horse with Micah in front of him. West, Burke suggested. Into the high country. They'll expect us to head for town. Eli shook his head. Blackwood owns half the territory in that direction. We'd be running straight into his mining operations. He turned to Judge Monroe. Sir, is there somewhere we can go? Somewhere safe where you can hear our case properly? The judge considered, then nodded slowly. My brother's ranch, 3 days' ride south. Edward never approved of my political connections. Blackwood will find no welcome there. It was decided. They set off at a brisk pace, keeping to the trees as much as possible. Behind them, shouts indicated Blackwood's men had found their trail, but the pursuit seemed disorganized, scattered by the chaos at the estate. As they rode, Judge Monroe explained what had happened. Blackwood arrived before dawn with those forged documents, a deed supposedly signed by your late wife, transferring ownership to Charlotte in case of your death or incapacity. But that's impossible, Eli objected. Sarah never signed any such thing. Of course not, but the forgery was good enough that under duress I might have authenticated it. The judge's face tightened with anger. He threatened to expose my son's actions during the war, said he'd see the boy hanged for treason. Your son is still alive? Burke asked, surprised, and Monroe nodded. Teaching mathematics at a college back east. Changed his name after the war. Built a new life. His voice broke slightly. I couldn't let Blackwood destroy him. So you agreed to authenticate the forgery, Eli guessed. I was stalling for time when your children arrived with Miss Holloway. They told me what was happening. Charlotte's deception, Blackwood's pursuit, all of it. The judge straightened in his saddle, some of his old authority returning. I may be many things, Cutter, but I'm still a judge. I know perjury when I hear it, and I know truth from the mouths of children. What happened then? Blackwood's men arrived moments later. There was a struggle. The girl, Ruth, tried to protect your boys. One of Blackwood's men struck her down. Monroe's expression darkened. They set fire to my house to destroy any evidence of their deception, then forced me to sign the authentication under threat of death. But the papers are valid now, Eli said grimly, with your signature. Not quite. For the first time, a small smile crossed the judge's weathered face. I signed, yes, but not as Ezekiel Monroe, judge of the territorial court. I signed as Ezekiel Smith. The authentication is worthless. Eli stared at him in surprise, then let out a short laugh. Clever. Blackwood was too arrogant to check carefully. He assumed I'd broken. Monroe's smile faded. But he'll discover the deception soon enough, and then he'll be even more determined to find us. They rode through the morning and into the afternoon, pushing the horses as much as they dared. The boys, despite their ordeal, remained stoic, though Eli could see exhaustion taking its toll, especially on Micah. By late afternoon, they reached a secluded valley with a small creek, a good place to rest the horses and plan their next move. As they dismounted, Burke pulled Eli aside. Blackwood won't give up, he said quietly. You know that. I know. Eli watched his sons helping Ruth gather firewood. But we have the advantage now. Judge Monroe is with us, not him. And Charlotte, he trailed off, the image of her death still fresh in his mind. She had been cruel, deceptive, willing to harm children for gain. But her end had been brutal, betrayed by the very man she'd schemed with. Blackwood shot her without hesitation, Burke said, reading his thoughts. That's the kind of man we're dealing with. He'll sacrifice anyone, anything to get what he wants. What does he want, really? Eli asked. You said it's about the railroad, but there's something more, isn't there? Burke hesitated, then nodded. During the war, the Army surveyed these territories extensively, not just for military purposes, but for what would come after: settlement, development, mining. I know, my father was part of those surveys. then you might know that certain maps were classified. Maps showing natural resources beyond the usual gold and silver deposits. Burke lowered his voice further. Your land sits on one of the largest coal seams in the territory, the kind that will fuel railroads for decades to come. Eli absorbed this. Coal. Not as immediately valuable as gold, perhaps, but in the long term, potentially worth far more, especially with the railroads expanding westward at a frantic pace. How does Blackwood know this? Those surveys were confidential. He has friends in high places, government officials willing to sell information for the right price. Burke grimaced. And he's patient. He's been buying land along that coal seam for years, piece by piece. Your property is the keystone, the access point that makes mining the entire seam economically viable. It all made sense now, Blackwood's persistence, his elaborate scheme with Charlotte, his willingness to forge documents and commit murder. This wasn't just about one homestead, it was about an empire. So what's our next move? Burke asked. Eli considered. Running to Judge Monroe's brother would buy them time, but not a solution. Blackwood's influence reached far, and eventually he would find them. And Eli was tired of running. We end this, he said finally, permanently. How? Blackwood has men, money, influence. And we have the truth, plus a territorial judge willing to testify to Blackwood's crimes. Eli's mind was working rapidly now, a plan taking shape. But first, we need proof of the coal seam, something official that confirms what Blackwood is really after. Burke frowned. The original survey maps would do it, but those would be in the territorial capital, or Washington. Not necessarily. Eli turned toward Judge Monroe, who was resting on a fallen log while Ruth brewed coffee over their small fire. Judge, a question about territorial records. The old man looked up, his sharp eyes still alert despite his exhaustion. What about them? Survey maps from during the war. Where would copies be kept locally? Monroe considered. The land office in Silver Falls would have some, but not classified military surveys. He paused, thinking. However, county seats were required to maintain duplicates of all federal surveys conducted in their jurisdiction, for tax purposes, primarily. And the county seat nearest my land, Cheyenne End, that would be Redemption Creek. Monroe's eyes narrowed with understanding. You're thinking the original survey showing the coal seam might be in the county records there. Eli nodded. If we could get those maps, prove what Blackwood is really after. It wouldn't just stop him from taking your land, the judge finished. It would expose his entire operation, the fraudulent purchases, the forged documents, possibly even corruption at the federal level. Burke looked skeptical. That's assuming the records are still there. Blackwood's had years to cover his tracks. Perhaps, Monroe acknowledged, but county records are harder to tamper with than you might think. Multiple copies, regular audits by territorial officials. If the maps exist, they'll be in the courthouse vault. Eli made his decision. Then that's where we're going, Redemption Creek. That's mad, Burke protested. Blackwood practically owns the town. Not all of it, Eli replied, thinking of Sheriff Grant, who had warned him about the custody papers. We still have allies there. Even so, walking into Redemption Creek is walking into Blackwood's stronghold, which is why he won't expect it. Eli smiled grimly. Sometimes the best place to hide is right under your enemy's nose. They spent the night in the valley, taking turns standing watch. The boys slept deeply, exhausted by their ordeal. Ruth recovered her strength, though a dark bruise marred her temple where Blackwood's man had struck her. Judge Monroe shared what he knew of Blackwood's operations, the land purchases, the political connections, the rumors of intimidation, and worse. The picture that emerged was of a man who had spent years building an empire through a combination of business acumen, ruthlessness, and outright criminality. How has he gotten away with it for so long? Eli asked. Money, Monroe replied simply, and fear. Those he can't buy, he terrifies, and those rare few who resist both. The judge's eyes grew distant. There have been accidents, unfortunate events that befall those who stand in his way. Like my mother, Ruth said quietly. She had been listening silently, her face solemn in the firelight. The doctor said it was fever, but she only got sick after refusing to sell our land. Eli felt a cold fury building inside him. Not the hot, blind rage that had nearly overcome him at Monroe's estate, but something colder, more focused. Blackwood had to be stopped, not just for Eli's family, but for all the others whose lives he had destroyed. We leave at first light, he decided. Burke, you and the judge take the boys to Silver Falls. It's closer than the judge's brother's ranch, and Blackwood won't expect us to return there so soon. And you? Burke asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Ruth and I will go to Redemption Creek. Find those maps. Eli turned to the girl. That is, if you're willing. You know the town, the people, and you have as much reason to want Blackwood stopped as I do. Ruth's eyes hardened with determination. I'll go, for my mother, and for all the others he's hurt. Sam, who had woken during the conversation, sat up. I'm coming too, Pa. No, Eli said firmly, it's too dangerous. I'm not a child anymore, Sam insisted. I can help. I know the courthouse. Remember when you took me there to file the cattle brand? I know where the records are kept. Eli studied his oldest son, seeing not just the determination in his eyes, but the man he was becoming. Sam had proven his courage repeatedly over the past days, showing a maturity beyond his years. All right, Eli conceded, but you follow my orders exactly. No risks, no heroics. Sam nodded solemnly. Yes, sir. As the others returned to sleep, Eli remained awake, staring into the dying fire. Tomorrow they would ride into the heart of Blackwood's territory, risking everything on the chance that proof of his crimes still existed in Dusty County records. It was a desperate gamble, but sometimes desperation was all a man had left. Dawn broke clear and cold over the mountains. They divided their supplies, checking weapons and planning rendezvous points in case they became separated. Judge Monroe would take Joshua and Micah to Silver Falls, accompanied by Burke. Eli, Sam, and Ruth would head for Redemption Creek. 3 days, Eli told Burke. If we're not at Silver Falls by then, don't wait. Take the boys and the judge to the territorial capital. Find the governor if you have to. Burke nodded grimly. We'll be ready either way. The parting was difficult, especially for the younger boys. Micah clung to Eli, tears streaming down his face. I don't want you to go, Pa, he sobbed. What if the bad men get you? Eli knelt, looking his youngest in the eye. Remember what I told you before? About promises? Micah nodded, sniffling. You said a cutter always keeps his word. That's right, and I promise you, Micah, I will come back. Nothing in this world could keep me from returning to you boys. He embraced his son tightly. You be brave for me. Help the judge and look after Joshua. Can you do that? The boy straightened, wiping his tears. Yes, sir. Joshua was next, more solemn but equally fearful. Be careful, Pa, he whispered, and take care of Sam too. I will. Eli hugged him close. You mind Mr. Burke and the judge. We'll be together again before you know it. As the two groups prepared to part ways, Judge Monroe approached Eli. Despite his age and recent rough treatment, the old man stood straight, his gaze direct. Cutter, he said quietly, what you're attempting is dangerous. Blackwood has deputies, judges, even a senator in his pocket. If you find evidence against him, there will be those who try to bury it, and you with it. I understand the risk, Eli replied. Monroe reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document, sealed with wax. Take this. It's a judicial writ authorizing you to examine any county records pertaining to land surveys in the territory. As a judge of the territorial court, I have that authority. Eli accepted the document, recognizing its value. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. That paper only works if the person reading it respects the law. And Blackwood's men, the judge shook his head. Just be careful. And if you find what you are looking for, get it to Silver Falls. I'll see it reaches the right people. With final embraces and solemn promises, the group separated. Burke, the judge, and the younger boys heading east toward Silver Falls, while Eli, Sam, and Ruth turned their horses west, toward Redemption Creek in the heart of Blackwood's domain. They rode in silence for the first hour, each lost in thought. Sam rode beside his father, occasionally glancing at him with a mix of pride and concern. Ruth led the way, her knowledge of the back trails proving invaluable as they avoided the main roads where Blackwood's men might be watching. By midday, they had covered nearly 20 miles, pushing their horses as hard as they dared. As they paused to water the animals at a small stream, Ruth finally broke the silence. "Do you think they made it to Silver Falls?" Eli nodded. "Burke knows what he's doing, and the judge is tougher than he looks." "What about Blackwood?" Sam asked. "Where do you think he is now?" "Searching for us in the wrong direction, if we're lucky." Eli scanned the horizon, habitually checking for signs of pursuit. "But luck isn't something we can count on." They resumed their journey, taking an even more circuitous route as they neared Redemption Creek. By late afternoon, they had reached a ridge overlooking the town. From this vantage point, they could see the main street, the church, the saloon, and, most importantly, the courthouse with its distinctive cupola. Redemption Creek appeared normal on the surface, people moving about their business, smoke rising from chimneys, a wagon unloading supplies at the general store. But Eli noticed additional horses hitched outside the sheriff's office and men positioned at key points around town, too alert to be ordinary citizens. "Blackwood's men," he murmured, watching the approaches to town. "How do we get past them?" Sam asked. Eli studied the layout, considering options. "We don't, not directly anyway." Ruth pointed to a narrow ravine east of town. "The old mine road comes in that way. Most folks don't use it anymore since the silver played out, but it leads right to the back of town, behind the livery stable." "Will it be watched?" "Probably not. It's overgrown, hard to spot unless you know it's there." She hesitated. "But we can't take the horses. The trail's too narrow, too rocky." Eli made his decision. "We'll go on foot then. Approach after dark." They retreated from the ridge, finding a sheltered hollow to wait for nightfall. As the sun sank toward the western mountains, Eli checked and rechecked his weapons, then outlined the plan to Sam and Ruth. "We enter town via the old mine road. Make our way to the courthouse, find the survey maps, and get out. Quick and quiet. No confrontations if we can avoid them." "And if we can't avoid them?" Sam asked, his young face serious. Eli met his son's gaze steadily. "Then we do what's necessary to protect each other and complete the mission. But remember, we're after evidence, not revenge. Blackwood will face justice through the law, not our guns." As darkness fell, they secured their horses, leaving them with enough rope to graze but not wander. Then, armed and ready, they began the careful descent toward Redemption Creek and the confrontation that awaited them. The old mine road was just as Ruth had described, narrow, overgrown, and treacherous in the dark. They moved in single file, Ruth leading the way, followed by Onisi, with Eli bringing up the rear. The moon provided just enough light to navigate, but they still had to proceed carefully, feeling their way along rocky sections where one misstep could mean a twisted ankle, or worse. After nearly an hour of slow progress, they reached the outskirts of town. The livery stable loomed ahead, its weathered boards silver in the moonlight. Beyond it lay the main street of Redemption Creek, and across that, their target, the courthouse. "Wait," Eli whispered, catching Ruth's arm as she started to move forward. "Listen." They froze, straining their ears. Voices drifted from behind the stable, men talking in low tones, the occasional clink of a bottle, the striking of a match. Blackwood's sentries positioned even here on the supposedly abandoned entrance to town. "Two of them, I think," Eli murmured. "We'll have to go around." Ruth pointed to a narrow alley between the stable and the adjacent feed store. "That way. It comes out near the church." They crept forward, keeping to the shadows. The alley was cluttered with discarded barrels and crates, making silent progress challenging. Halfway through, Sam's foot caught on an empty tin can, sending it clattering across the hard-packed dirt. They froze again, hearts pounding. Behind them, the conversation at the stable ceased. "You hear that?" one of the sentries called. "Probably just a cat," his companion replied. "Or a rat. Place is full of them." "Better check it out anyway. Blackwood'll have our hides if we miss something." Footsteps approached the alley entrance. Eli pushed Sam and Ruth deeper into the shadows behind a stack of feed sacks, drawing his revolver but hoping he wouldn't need to use it. A gunshot would alert the entire town to their presence. A bearded man appeared at the alley entrance, lantern raised. Its yellow light illuminated the first few yards of the passage, falling short of their hiding place. "See anything?" the second sentry called. The bearded man peered into the darkness, squinting. For a heart-stopping moment, his gaze seemed to fix directly on their hiding spot. Then he shrugged. Nothing. Like you said, probably just a cat. He turned away, returning to his post. Eli waited until the murmur of resumed conversation confirmed the men had settled back down before signaling to move forward. They emerged near the church, as Ruth had promised. From there, they had a clear view of the courthouse across the main street. Two more of Blackwood's men stood on its steps, rifles cradled in their arms. Now what? Sam whispered. We can't just walk up to them. Eli studied the courthouse, noting the side entrance used by the clerk's office staff, the windows, all dark at this hour, and the rear of the building, which backed onto a small garden. We go in through the back, he decided, but first we need a distraction. Ruth pointed to the saloon down the street, where light and noise spilled into the night. There's our distraction. Holloway's Saloon, my father's name. But my uncle runs it now. He never liked Blackwood. Your uncle? Eli looked at her with surprise. You never mentioned him. We weren't close. After Ma died, he offered to take me in, but said he couldn't manage a girl in a saloon. Her voice held old hurt. But he's a good man in his way, and he hated what Blackwood did to our family. Eli considered this new information. Can we trust him? With this, yes. Ruth's confidence was absolute. He may not have helped me when I needed it, but he'd do anything to hurt Blackwood. All right, wait here with Sam. I'll approach your uncle, see if he can create the distraction we need. No, Ruth shook her head firmly. It should be me. He might not recognize you, and he'd be suspicious of a stranger asking for help. But he'll listen to me. Eli hesitated, reluctant to send the girl into potential danger. But her logic was sound, and they were running out of options. Be careful, he finally agreed. Tell him we need those guards drawn away from the courthouse for 10 minutes. No more, no less. And Ruth? He gripped her shoulder gently. Don't take any unnecessary risks. She nodded solemnly, then slipped down, using the shadows to work her way down to the saloon. Eli and Sam watched her go, then retreated deeper into the churchyard to wait. Will she be all right, Pa? Sam asked, his voice betraying his concern. She's smart and careful, Eli replied, hoping his confidence was justified. And she knows these people. It's our best chance. They waited in tense silence. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Eli was beginning to fear something had gone wrong when shouting erupted from the saloon. Moments later, the doors burst open, and a crowd of men spilled into the street, punching, cursing, and overturning a water trough in their enthusiasm. A full-scale brawl was underway, spreading quickly along the main street. As Eli had hoped, the guards at the courthouse abandoned their posts, rushing to join either the fight or the attempts to quell it. Now, Eli whispered, leading Sam in a crouched run across the street and around to the back of the courthouse. The rear door was locked, but Eli made short work of it with his hunting knife, easing the latch back carefully to avoid damage that might be noticed later. They slipped inside, finding themselves in a dark hallway that smelled of dust and old paper. The records room is this way, Sam whispered, leading his father through the familiar building. Down these stairs. The basement level of the courthouse housed the county archives, land deeds, birth and death records, tax assessments, and, most importantly for their purposes, survey maps. The room was locked, but again, Eli's knife proved sufficient to gain entry. Inside, rows of shelves held leather-bound volumes and rolled maps secured with ribbon. A massive oak cabinet dominated one wall, its dozens of narrow drawers labeled by year and township. The war-era surveys would be from 61 to 65, Eli murmured, scanning the cabinet labels. And we need the ones covering our valley. Redemption Valley, Township 7 North, Sam supplied, already pulling open drawers. That's what it says on our deed. They worked quickly, methodically, aware that their distraction wouldn't last forever. Each found several maps that might be relevant, unrolling them on the large table in the center of the room to examine by the light of the small lantern Eli had brought. Here, Sam said suddenly, his voice hushed with excitement. This one shows our land. And look, he pointed to a series of markings along the valley floor, annotations in faded ink that Eli recognized immediately as the standardized notations used in geological surveys. His father had taught him to read such maps long ago. Coal, he confirmed, tracing the symbols. a massive seam running right through our property and continuing for miles in either direction. But there was more. Additional notations indicated something his father hadn't mentioned: the optimal route for a railroad line, following the valley's natural contours through the mountain pass on Eli's land. The survey had identified it as the only economically viable path for a transcontinental connection through that section of the territory. "This is why Blackwood wants our land so badly," Eli said softly. "Not just for the coal, but for the railroad access. Whoever controls this pass controls all commerce through the Northern Territory." "What's this?" Sam had found another document, this one a letter rather than a map. He read aloud: "To the Secretary of War regarding Survey 7N, Redemption Valley. The coal deposits herein mapped are of superior quality and extraordinary extent. It is the recommendation of this office that said lands be reserved for national interest and not opened for private claim." The letter was signed by the territorial governor and dated 1863. Yet the land had been opened for settlement anyway, perhaps an oversight in the chaotic final years of the war, or possibly through deliberate manipulation by someone with influence. "This proves Blackwood knew what he was after," Eli said, carefully rolling the map and letter together. "And it proves he's been acquiring land that should have remained federal property." "Is that enough to stop him?" Sam asked. "It's enough to start an investigation. With Judge Monroe's testimony about the forged documents, and this evidence of what Blackwood is really after." Eli allowed himself a small smile. "Yes, it's enough." They secured the documents inside Eli's coat, then carefully returned the other maps to their drawers, erasing all signs of their search. As they prepared to leave, footsteps echoed in the hallway above, heavy, purposeful strides approaching the stairs. Eli doused the lantern, plunging the room into darkness. He pulled Sam behind a row of shelves, pressing a finger to his lips in warning. The footsteps descended the stairs, paused outside the records room door. Then the handle turned and the door swung open. Lamplight spilled into the room, illuminating a tall figure silhouetted in the doorway. Wendell Blackwood. He entered slowly, his expensive boots echoing on the wooden floor. Another figure followed, Sheriff Grant, looking uncomfortable and conflicted. "I tell you, Blackwood, nobody's been in here," the sheriff was saying. "The fight at the saloon was just miners blowing off steam." "And I tell you, Sheriff, that convenient brawl was a distraction." Blackwood's voice was cold, controlled. "Check the survey drawers. See if anything's been disturbed." Grant moved reluctantly to the cabinet, pulling open several drawers and peering inside. "Everything looks in order to me." Blackwood wasn't satisfied. He began a methodical inspection of the room, moving from section to section, his lamp casting long shadows as he searched. Eli and Sam pressed deeper into their hiding place, scarcely daring to breathe. Discovery now, with the evidence on their person, would mean not just failure but likely death. Blackwood had already demonstrated his willingness to kill anyone who stood in his way. The businessman's search brought him to their row of shelves. One more step, and his lamp would illuminate their hiding place. Then mercifully a commotion erupted upstairs, shouting the sound of running feet. "Sheriff," a voice called down. "Sheriff Grant, there's trouble at the saloon. Holloway's got a shotgun, says he's going to kill any of Blackwood's men who don't clear out of town." Grant looked almost relieved at the interruption. "I'd better handle this." Blackwood's face darkened with anger. "Find Holloway, arrest him. I want this town locked down until we find Cutter and those maps." So he knew. Somehow Blackwood had discovered their mission. Perhaps Ruth had been recognized, or one of his many informants had spotted them on the approach to town. The sheriff hurried upstairs, Blackwood following with obvious reluctance. As soon as their footsteps faded, Eli led Sam quickly to the door, peering out to ensure the hallway was clear. "We need to get to the back exit," he whispered. "Fast." They moved silently through the darkened courthouse, reaching the rear door without incident. Outside, the night air carried the sounds of the continuing disturbance at the saloon: shouting, breaking glass, the occasional crack of a pistol fired into the air. "Ruth," Sam said worriedly, "she's still at the saloon." Eli shared his concern, but they couldn't risk approaching the center of town directly. "We'll circle around, try to reach her from behind the buildings." They made their way through back alleys and side streets, avoiding the main thoroughfare, where Blackwood's men were now visible, moving with purpose, clearly searching for someone. For them. As they neared the saloon, a figure darted from a shadowy doorway, nearly colliding with them. Eli raised his revolver, then quickly lowered it as he recognized Ruth. "Thank God," she gasped. "I've been looking everywhere for you. Uncle Thomas is creating the biggest distraction he can. But Blackwood knows you're here. His men are searching every building." "We got what we came for," Eli told her. "Now we need to get out of town before they seal it off completely." "Too late for that," Ruth said grimly. "They've already posted men on every road out. Our best chance is to hide until morning, then try to slip out with the supply wagons." Eli considered their options. Staying in town was dangerous, but attempting to leave now with Blackwood's men actively searching might be even more so. "Is there somewhere we can hide? Somewhere they won't think to look?" Ruth nodded. "Uncle Thomas has a cellar beneath the saloon. It's where he keeps his best whiskey. There's a hidden entrance from the storeroom." It was their best option. They worked their way carefully toward the rear of the saloon, avoiding the ongoing confrontation at its front. The storeroom door was unlocked, as Ruth had promised. Inside, amid barrels of liquor and sacks of grain, she located a trapdoor concealed beneath a rug. "Down here," she whispered, lifting the heavy wooden door to reveal a ladder descending into darkness. They climbed down into a cool, earthen cellar lined with racks of bottles and aging barrels. Ruth closed the trapdoor above them, then lit a small lamp that stood on a rough wooden table. "We should be safe here for now," she said. "Uncle Thomas won't betray us, and no one else knows about this place." Eli wasn't entirely convinced, but they had few alternatives. He checked that the maps were still secure inside his coat, then helped Sam find a comfortable spot to rest among the barrels. The boy was exhausted, his young face drawn with fatigue. "Get some sleep," Eli told him. "I'll keep watch." Despite his protests, Sam was asleep within minutes, his breathing deep and regular. Ruth sat nearby, knees drawn up to her chest, eyes fixed on the trapdoor above. "Your uncle," Eli said quietly. "He's taking a significant risk for us." Ruth nodded. "He's always hated Blackwood. More so after what happened to my mother." She hesitated. "He blames himself, I think, for not doing more to help her when Blackwood started pressuring her to sell. And now he's helping us to make amends." Perhaps. Ruth's expression was difficult to read in the dim lamplight. Or perhaps he just recognizes that Blackwood needs to be stopped before he destroys everything good in this territory. They fell silent, listening to the muffled sounds of the search continuing above. Occasionally, footsteps passed directly overhead, but no one discovered their hiding place. As the hours passed, Eli's thoughts turned to his younger sons, hoping they had reached Silver Falls safely with Burke and Judge Monroe. If all went according to plan, they would be reunited in just 2 days. And if not, he pushed the thought away. Failure wasn't an option, not with his family's future at stake. Sometime past midnight, the trap door creaked open. Eli had his revolver drawn before it was fully raised, only lowering it when he recognized Thomas Holloway's weathered face peering down at them. "Coast is clear for now," the saloon keeper said gruffly. "Blackwood's called off the search until dawn. Most of his men are at the hotel getting some shut-eye." He descended the ladder, a bundle under one arm. "Brought you some food and news." Eli accepted the bundle, bread, cheese, and dried beef, enough to sustain them through the night. "What news?" "Blackwood's in a state. Seems someone broke into his office at the mining company while he was busy at the courthouse. Took some papers." Holloway's craggy face split in a grin. "Two-pronged attack, eh? Clever." Eli frowned in confusion. "We didn't—" "Oh, I know you didn't, but someone did." Holloway settled onto a barrel, helping himself to a sip from a nearby bottle. "Word is it was Burke. Daniel Burke, one of Blackwood's own men." Burke. So the Confederate had decided to take additional action while escorting the boys and the judge to safety. Eli wasn't sure whether to be grateful or concerned about this development. "What did he take?" "Don't rightly know, but whatever it was, it's got Blackwood foaming at the mouth." Holloway corked the bottle, his expression turning serious. "He's offering $1,000 for your capture, Cutter, dead or alive. A substantial sum, more than most men in the territory earned in a year. It would turn every opportunist and bounty hunter for 100 miles into a potential enemy." "What about Sam and Ruth?" Eli asked, glancing at the sleeping boy. "500 each, but alive only. Seems he still needs them for something." Holloway's eyes narrowed. What exactly did you find in those records that's got him so riled? Eli hesitated, then decided the man had earned their trust. He withdrew the map and letter, spreading them on the table. Coal, a massive seam running right through my land and beyond, and the only viable railroad pass through the northern mountains. He tapped the governor's letter. Land that should have been reserved for federal use, but somehow ended up in private hands. Holloway studied the documents, whistling softly. That'd do it all right. Man like Blackwood, with that under his control, he'd be more powerful than the governor himself. And now he knows we have the proof. Eli rolled the documents carefully, returning them to his coat. We need to get out of town at first light before he can organize a thorough search. I can help with that, Holloway offered. Supply wagon leaves for Silver Falls at 6. Driver's a friend of mine, no love for Blackwood. He'll take you. Eli nodded gratefully. Thank you for all of this. Holloway waved away his thanks, looking uncomfortable. Doing it for Ruth and for her mother. Should have done more for them when it counted. He glanced at the sleeping girl, regret etched in the lines of his face. Too late to change that now, but not too late to help stop Blackwood. The saloon keeper departed shortly after, promising to return before dawn to lead them to the supply wagon. Eli tried to rest, but sleep eluded him. Instead, he found himself studying the map again by lamplight, tracing the coal seam with his finger, marveling at how something hidden beneath the earth could drive men to such lengths of deception and violence. His thoughts were interrupted by Sam stirring, the boy sitting up and rubbing his eyes. Huh? What time is it? Early still. Go back to sleep. Instead, Sam moved to sit beside him, peering at the map. Is that really what Blackwood's after? Just coal? Not just coal, Eli explained. Control, power. With this land, he controls the railroad's access to the Northern Territory. That means he controls all commerce, all development. He tapped the map. It's not about the mineral wealth. It's about what it represents. Sam nodded thoughtfully. Like in your stories about the war, how it wasn't just about slavery, but about who got to decide the future of the country. Eli smiled faintly, surprised by his son's insight. Something like that. Men like Blackwood, they think their wealth entitles them to shape the world according to their vision, regardless of who gets hurt in the process. And men like you stop them, Sam said with simple conviction. Before Eli could respond, footsteps sounded overhead. Not the casual movements of the saloon keeper, but the heavy, coordinated tread of multiple men. Ruth woke instantly, her eyes wide. Something's wrong, she whispered. The footsteps crossed the storeroom directly above them, then stopped. A moment of silence, then the trapdoor flew open, revealing not Thomas Holloway, but Wendell Blackwood himself, flanked by 2 armed men. Mr. Cutter, Blackwood said, his refined voice at odds with the cold fury in his eyes. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Eli pushed Sam behind him, drawing his revolver. Stay back, Blackwood. The businessman smiled thinly. I wouldn't if I were you. Not unless you want to see what happens when a kerosene lamp breaks among all these lovely whiskey barrels. One of his men held a lamp threateningly over the open trapdoor. Rather spectacular, I imagine, though tragically fatal for everyone down there. Eli's grip on his revolver tightened, but he knew Blackwood wasn't bluffing. One shot and the lamp would fall, turning their hiding place into an inferno. How did you find us? He demanded, playing for time, mind racing for a way out. Mr. Holloway proved more cooperative than expected, once properly motivated. Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. It's amazing how quickly loyalty evaporates when faced with certain pressures. Ruth gasped. What did you do to my uncle? Nothing permanent, yet. Blackwood extended his hand. The maps, Mr. Cutter, now, or I promise you, your children will watch you burn. Eli weighed his options. The evidence in his coat might be their only hope of stopping Blackwood legally, but it was worthless if they didn't survive to deliver it to Judge Monroe. The maps for our safe passage out of town, he countered. All 3 of us. Blackwood laughed, a sound devoid of humor. You're hardly in a position to negotiate, but I'm a reasonable man. Give me the maps, and I'll let the children go. You, however, have become too much of a nuisance to ignore. No deal, Eli said flatly. All of us, or none. Very well. Blackwood nodded to his man with the lamp. On my count. One? Wait! Sam stepped forward, ignoring his father's attempt to hold him back. There's something you don't know about those maps. Blackwood paused, curiosity overcoming his impatience. And what might that be, young man? Sam met the businessman's gaze steadily. They're not the only copies. Pa already sent the originals to Judge Monroe in Silver Falls. These are just duplicates he made. It was a bluff, delivered with such conviction that even Eli was momentarily impressed. Blackwood's expression wavered, uncertainty crossing his features for the first time. You're lying, he said, but without his previous confidence. Am I? Sam crossed his arms. The judge is probably showing them to the territorial governor right now, along with Charlotte's forged documents and your custody order. The mention of Charlotte touched a nerve. Blackwood's face darkened. Charlotte was a fool, sentimental, weak. She let herself become attached to you brats. That's why you shot her, Eli realized aloud. Not just because she might have harmed the boys, but because she was becoming a liability. She served her purpose, Blackwood said dismissively. Save you. He turned back to his man. Proceed. One last chance, Blackwood, Eli said, his voice steady despite the fear clutching at his heart. Let us go and I'll give you the maps. Otherwise, you'll never find them. What are you talking about? They're on your person. Eli shook his head. Not anymore. I hid them when we first came down here. Somewhere in this cellar. You can search, but there are dozens of hiding places. And if we teach, no one will ever know where to look. Another bluff, but delivered with the same conviction as Sam's. Father and son, cut from the same cloth. Blackwood studied him, weighing the probability that he was lying against the value of the maps. Finally, he seemed to reach a decision. Very well, Cutter. You and the children may leave town, but I keep Holloway as insurance until you're gone. And if I discover you've been lying about those other copies, he let the threat hang unfinished. I'll need proof that Thomas is unharmed, Eli insisted. Blackwood gestured, and his men hauled a third figure into view. Thomas Holloway, bruised but alive, looking ashamed as his eyes met Ruth's accusing gaze. I'm sorry, girl, he mumbled. They threatened to burn the saloon with everyone inside. Ruth's expression softened slightly. It's all right, Uncle Thomas. Blackwood's patience was wearing thin. The maps, Cutter. Now. Eli moved slowly, withdrawing the rolled documents from inside his coat. He passed them up through the trap door, careful to keep his movements deliberate, non-threatening. Blackwood unrolled them, eyes scanning the contents rapidly. Satisfaction crossed his face as he confirmed they were indeed the originals. A pleasure doing business with you, he said, the mockery returning to his voice. You have until noon to be clear of Redemption Creek. After that, all deals are off. He and his men withdrew, taking Thomas Holloway with them. The trapdoor remained open, an invitation to leave that felt more like a trap. Do we trust him, Pa? Sam asked quietly. Not for a second, Eli replied, but we don't have much choice. We need to get out of here, find another way to stop him. Ruth was already ascending the ladder. Uncle Thomas will help us if he can. And we still have the letter. I saw you only give Blackwood the map. Eli smiled grimly. He had indeed managed to separate the governor's letter from the map during the exchange, keeping it hidden in a separate pocket. Not as damning as the complete set of documents, but still evidence of Blackwood's deception. They emerged cautiously into the storeroom, finding it empty. The saloon beyond was eerily quiet, chairs overturned from the earlier brawl, the smell of spilled whiskey and gunpowder hanging in the air. The back door, Eli said softly. We'll make for the livery stable, see if we can secure horses. They moved silently through the abandoned saloon, reaching the rear exit without incident. Outside, the false dawn was just beginning to lighten the eastern sky. The town appeared deserted, but Eli knew better than to trust appearances. Blackwood's men would be watching, waiting to ensure they left as promised, or to eliminate them if the businessman had already changed his mind. Stay close, he murmured. Move quickly but naturally, like we have every right to be here. They made their way along the back streets toward the livery stable, encountering no one. The town's usual early risers, bakers, stable hands, shopkeepers, were conspicuously absent. Blackwood's influence at work, clearing the streets for whatever he had planned. The livery stable doors stood open, a single lantern burning inside. As they approached, a figure stepped from the shadows. Sheriff Grant, his expression troubled. "Cutter," he said quietly. "I was hoping you'd come this way." Eli pushed the children behind him, hand dropping to his revolver. "Are you here on Blackwood's orders, Sheriff?" Grant shook his head. "I'm here because this has gone far enough. Blackwood's crossed too many lines, threatening a whole town, holding Holloway hostage, offering bounties on children." He spat disgustedly. "That's not law. That's tyranny." "Why should we trust you?" Ruthin demanded. "Because I've got 3 horses saddled and waiting inside," the sheriff replied simply. "And because I sent a telegram to the territorial marshal this morning, reporting Blackwood for fraud, extortion, and attempted murder." Eli studied the man's face, searching for deception and finding only resolve. "That's a dangerous position to take, Sheriff." "Maybe so, but a man can only look the other way for so long before he stops being able to face himself in the mirror." Grant gestured toward the stable interior. "The horses are ready. There's food and water in the saddlebags. Enough to get you to Silver Falls if you ride hard." "What about Blackwood?" Sam asked. "Won't he try to stop us?" "He thinks you're taking the supply wagon at 6. That gives you about an hour's head start." The sheriff handed Eli a folded paper. "And this might help even the odds." Eli opened it to find a crude map, showing a route through the mountains that bypassed the main road to Silver Falls. "Old hunting trail," Grant explained. "Rough going in places, but Blackwood's men won't know it. Most aren't from around here." Eli folded the map carefully, tucking it into his shirt. "Thank you, Sheriff. But what about you? When Blackwood discovers that you've helped us..." Grant's hand rested on his revolver. "I've been sheriff in this town for 15 years. I've got friends here, more than Blackwood knows." His expression hardened. "Besides, the territorial marshal should arrive by tomorrow. With any luck, Blackwood will be in custody by nightfall." The 3 horses were indeed ready, saddled and provisioned as promised. Eli helped Ruth mount, then boosted Sam onto the second animal before swinging into the saddle of the third, a sturdy bay gelding with the look of a horse that could run all day. "Remember, stay off the main roads," Grant advised. "And Cutter, when you reach Judge Monroe, tell him Sheriff Matthew Grant sends his respects and his apologies for being slow to stand up." Eli nodded, extending his hand. The sheriff clasped it firmly. "Godspeed, Cutter, and good luck." They rode out the back of the livery stable, keeping to the shadows as they made their way to the edge of town. As promised, no one challenged them or raised an alarm. Within minutes, they had reached the tree line beyond the last buildings of Redemption Creek, turning their horses toward the mountains and the promise of safety in Silver Falls. The sun was just cresting the eastern ridge as they urged their mounts to a gallop, leaving Blackwood and his schemes behind, at least for the moment. Eli knew the respite was temporary. The businessman wouldn't give up so easily, especially now that he had confirmed what was at stake. But for the first time since finding his sons locked out in the snow, Eli felt a flicker of genuine hope. They had evidence of Blackwood's true motives. They had allies: Burke, Judge Monroe, now Sheriff Grant. And most importantly, they had each other. The trail narrowed as they entered the mountains, forcing them to slow to a trot. Sam rode confidently beside his father, face set with determination despite his exhaustion. Ruth led the way, her knowledge of the local terrain proving invaluable once again. 2 days to Silver Falls, Eli calculated aloud. "If we push hard, we might make it in less." "And then what, Pa?" Sam asked. "Even with the letter, is it enough to stop Blackwood?" "It's enough to start the process," Eli replied. "With Judge Monroe's testimony about the forged documents, Sheriff Grant's witness to Blackwood's methods, and the governor's letter showing the land should never have been opened for settlement." He nodded firmly. "Yes, it's enough." Ruth looked less convinced. "Blackwood has powerful friends, politicians, businessmen, people who want that railroad as badly as he does." "True enough," Eli acknowledged, "but he also has enemies, people he's wronged, cheated, intimidated. Once they see him vulnerable, they'll come forward." They rode in silence for a time, each lost in thought. The mountain air was crisp and clean, scented with pine and sage. In another context, it might have been a pleasant journey through beautiful country. Now, every shadow held potential danger, every unexpected sound a threat. By midday, they had covered substantial ground, Following the hunting trail Sheriff Grant had mapped for them, it was indeed rough going in places, narrow passages where they had to dismount and lead the horses, steep inclines that left the animals blowing hard. They paused in a small meadow to rest and water the horses at a clear spring. Sam helped Ruth gather berries growing along the edge of the clearing, while Eli scouted the trail ahead, making sure they weren't being followed. Finding no sign of pursuit, he returned to the meadow, allowing himself a moment to truly look at his oldest son. Sam had changed in the days since they'd fled the homestead. There was a new steadiness to him, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. The boy was becoming a man, forged in the crucible of their ordeal. Ruth, too, had proven herself repeatedly brave, resourceful, loyal. Joseph Holloway would have been proud of his daughter. Eli silently renewed his promise to the dead man, vowing that when they survived this, Ruth would always have a home with them. They resumed their journey, pushing the horses as much as they dared on the difficult terrain. By late afternoon, they had crossed the most challenging section of the trail and were beginning the long descent toward the valley that would eventually lead them to Silver Falls. "We might make it by tomorrow evening," Ruth calculated, studying the landmarks, "if we keep this pace." Eli nodded, relieved at the prospect of reuniting with his younger sons. "We'll stop for the night in a few hours. The horses need rest, and so do we." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the trail, they found a suitable campsite, a small clearing beside a stream, sheltered by tall pines. Eli tended the horses while Sam and Ruth gathered firewood and prepared a simple meal from the provisions Sheriff Grant had provided. They ate in companionable silence, the tension of the past days easing slightly now that they were safely away from Redemption Creek. After the meal, Eli took the first watch, rifle across his knees, while the children slept near the small fire. The night passed peacefully, stars wheeling overhead, the only sounds the soft murmur of the stream and the occasional call of a nightbird. Eli found himself thinking of Sarah, wondering what she would make of all that had happened. She had been practical, level-headed, with an innate sense of justice that saw through pretense and deception. She would have recognized Charlotte's false nature immediately, he was certain. "I've tried to do right by them, Sarah," he whispered to the night sky, "to keep them safe, teach them what matters. I hope I haven't failed." No answer came, of course, but the weight in his chest seemed lighter somehow, as if unburdened by the confession. Dawn broke clear and cool, promising another fair day for travel. They broke camp efficiently, back on the trail as the sun cleared the eastern mountains. The horses, rested and fed, moved with renewed energy, covering ground quickly as the terrain gradually became less rugged. By mid-morning, they had reached a high ridge that offered a sweeping view of the valley below. In the far distance, perhaps 20 miles away, the buildings of Silver Falls were just visible, a cluster of structures nestled against the base of the mountains. "We'll be there by nightfall," Eli said with satisfaction. "Maybe sooner." As they began the descent from the ridge, a movement in the valley below caught his attention. Riders, at least a dozen, moving fast along the main road from Redemption Creek towards Silver Falls. "Blackwood's men," he said grimly, pointing them out to Sam and Ruth. "He must have discovered we didn't take the supply wagon." "They're ahead of us," Sam observed. "They'll reach Silver Falls first." Eli nodded, recalculating their approach. "We'll have to avoid the main road entirely. Come in from the north, through the forest." Ruth studied the distant riders, her expression troubled. "What if they find Burke and the others before we get there?" It was a possibility Eli had been trying not to consider. If Blackwood's men reached Silver Falls first, they might already know that Judge Monroe was there with Joshua and Micah. They could be walking into a trap. "We need to warn them," he decided. "Is there a way to get a message to Silver Falls ahead of us?" Ruth thought for a moment, then pointed to a thin column of smoke rising from a homestead in the valley below. "The Wilsons' place. They have a son who works at the hotel in Silver Falls. Sometimes he carries messages for people." It was their best option. They altered course, heading directly for the distant homestead. As they drew closer, Eli could see it was a modest farm, a small cabin, a barn, fields of corn and wheat stretching beyond. A woman was hanging laundry outside, while a man chopped wood nearby. They approached openly, not wanting to alarm the farmers. The man set down his axe as they rode in, watching them warily. "Morning," Eli called. "Are you Mr. Wilson?" The farmer nodded, still cautious. That's right. What can I do for you folks? Eli dismounted, keeping his movements slow and unthreatening. My name's Elijah Cutter. This is my sons Sam and Ruth Holloway. We need to get an urgent message to Silver Falls. Ruth tells me your son might be able to help. Wilson relaxed slightly at the mention of Ruth's name. Holloway? Joseph Holloway's girl? Ruth nodded. Yes, sir. My father's been gone a while now, but I remember your family from church. Of course, of course. Wilson's demeanor warmed considerably. Joseph was a good man, helped us dig our well when we first settled here. He gestured toward the cabin. Come inside. Martha will fix you something to eat while we talk. The interior of the cabin was neat and humble, much like Eli's own home. Mrs. Wilson, a kind-faced woman with graying hair, immediately set about preparing coffee and biscuits for the unexpected guests. Now then, Wilson said, once they were seated at the rough wooden table. What's this message that's so urgent? Eli explained as concisely as possible. Blackwood's scheme, the forged documents, their flight to Redemption Creek and recovery of the evidence, and now they're concerned that Blackwood's men would reach Silver Falls before them. We need to warn Judge Monroe and the others that Blackwood's men are coming, he concluded. Is there any way your son could get a message to them today? Wilson considered. Timothy's not due home until tomorrow, but he glanced at his wife, who nodded encouragingly. I could ride there myself. It's only 10 miles across the valley if you cut straight through. On a good horse, I could be there in 2 hours. We'd be very grateful, Eli said, but I don't want to put you in danger. Blackwood's not a man to cross lightly. Wilson's face hardened. Blackwood's been trying to buy our land for 3 years now. Sends his men around every few months with a new offer, each one worse than the last. I know exactly what kind of man he is. He stood, decision made. I'll take your message. Martha, pack me some food while I saddle Brutus. While Wilson prepared for his journey, Eli wrote a brief note to Burke, warning him of Blackwood's approach and advising him to take Judge Monroe and the boys to a secure location until they arrived. He sealed it with wax from Mrs. Wilson's candle, pressing his ring into it as a sign of authenticity. Within half an hour, Wilson was ready to depart, the message safely tucked inside his coat. I'll find your friend Burke and deliver this personally, Moran. He promised him. And I'll tell the judge you're on your way. Thank you, Eli said sincerely, clasping the farmer's hand. We won't forget this. As Wilson rode off, taking a direct route across the valley that would bypass Blackwood's men on the main road, Mrs. Wilson insisted they stay for a proper meal before continuing in their journey. You look half-starved, all of you, she said firmly. A hot meal and an hour's rest won't make much difference to your arrival time, but it might make all the difference to your strength when you get there. Eli couldn't argue with her logic. Besides, the horses could use the additional rest before the final push to Silver Falls. They ate gratefully, venison stew, fresh bread, and apple pie still warm from the oven. It was the first proper meal they'd had in days, and Eli watched with satisfaction as Sam and Ruth ate their fill, color returning to their cheeks. Mrs. Wilson refused all offers of payment, insisting that neighbors help neighbors in this country. Just promise you'll stop Blackwood, she said as they prepared to leave. For all our sakes. We'll do our best, Eli assured her. Back on the trail, they made good time, their spirits lifted by the Wilsons' kindness and the knowledge that a warning was on its way to Burke and the others. The horses, too, seemed rejuvenated by the rest and grain provided at the farm. As afternoon stretched toward evening, the buildings of Silver Falls grew steadily larger on the horizon. They approached cautiously, using the forest at the northern edge of town for cover, watching for any sign of Blackwood's men. The town appeared normal at first glance. People moving about their business, smoke rising from chimneys, a wagon unloading supplies at the general store. But Eli noticed armed men positioned at key points around the perimeter, too alert to be ordinary citizens. Blackwood's men, he murmured. They've already arrived. What do we do? Sam asked, voice tense with worry for his brothers. Eli studied the town layout, searching for the safest approach. If Wilson had delivered their message, Burke would have moved the judge and the boys to a secure location. But where? The church, Ruth suggested suddenly. It's on the north side of town, away from the main street, and it has a caretaker's cottage behind it. Perfect hiding place. It made sense. Churches were generally respected even by men like Blackwood, who might hesitate to conduct a violent search on sacred ground. They left their horses tethered in the forest, proceeding on foot toward the church, a simple white clapboard building with a tall steeple. As they approached from behind, Eli saw lights burning in the small cottage Ruth had mentioned. He motioned for Sam and Ruth to stay back while he crept closer, revolver drawn. At the cottage window, he peered carefully inside. Relief flooded through him at what he saw. Burke seated at a table with Judge Monroe, while Joshua and Micah played a quiet game of checkers on the floor. All safe, all unharmed. Eli tapped gently on the window. Burke's head snapped up, hand reaching for his rifle before he recognized Eli and relaxed. He moved quickly to the back door, opening it to usher them inside. "Cutter," he greeted with obvious relief. "Wilson found us just in time. Blackwood's men arrived an hour later." Eli barely heard him. He was already kneeling, gathering Joshua and Micah into his arms as they rushed to him with cries of joy. "Pa, you came back," Micah sobbed, clinging to his neck. "I promised, didn't I?" Eli held them tight, his heart full. Over their shoulders, he saw Sam join the embrace, the family reunited at last. Judge Monroe watched with approval, his weathered face softening. "Well done, Cutter. Did you secure the evidence?" Eli reluctantly released his sons, withdrawing the governor's letter from his coat. "Blackwood has the map, but I managed to keep this. It's not everything, but it confirms the land should never have been opened for settlement." The judge examined the document, nodding slowly. "This, combined with my testimony about the forged deed and Charlotte's deception, it's a start, but Blackwood still has powerful friends. And he's not giving up," Burke added grimly. "He's offering $2,000 now for your capture. His men are searching every building in town." "Which is why we need to leave," Eli said, "tonight, while we still can." "And go where?" Judge Monroe asked. "Blackwood's influence reaches throughout the territory." "Beyond the territory, then, to the capital." Eli had been considering this option during their journey. "If we can get these documents to the territorial governor, along with sworn statements from all of us, it might work," the judge agreed. "I have colleagues in the capital who would support an investigation, especially with evidence this compelling." "The capital is 4 days' ride," Burke pointed out, "and every road will be watched." "Then we don't take the roads," Eli replied. "We go cross-country, through the high country where Blackwood's men can't follow easily." It was a dangerous plan, particularly with the younger boys, but their options were dwindling rapidly. Each hour they remained in Silver Falls increased the risk of discovery. "We'll need supplies," Burke said, already thinking practically, "and fresh horses." "I can help with that," Judge Monroe offered. "My brother-in-law owns the livery stable. He'll provide horses without question." Plans were made quickly. They would depart after midnight when the town was quietest and Blackwood's men might be less vigilant. Burke would secure supplies while the judge arranged for horses. Eli and the children would remain hidden in the caretaker's cottage until it was time to leave. As darkness fell, Eli sat with his sons, listening to their account of the journey to Silver Falls with Burke and the judge. They had encountered no trouble, reaching the town safely and finding shelter at the church through the judge's friendship with the pastor. "Mr. Burke taught us to play poker," Joshua reported, eyes bright with the memory. "But not for money, just for matches." "Did he now?" Eli raised an eyebrow at Burke, who looked unrepentant. "Boys should know how to read a man's face," the Confederate said with a shrug. "Useful skill in this world." Eli couldn't argue with that. Besides, after all Burke had done to help his family, the man had earned the right to teach his sons whatever he deemed appropriate. Burke departed to gather supplies, moving cautiously through the darkened town. Judge Monroe left soon after to arrange for horses, promising to return within 2 hours. Alone with the children, Eli found himself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought them to this point. 2 weeks ago, his greatest concern had been whether Charlotte would make a good mother to his sons. Now they were fugitives, pursued by one of the most powerful men in the territory, with only a fragile alliance and a single document standing between them and ruin. Yet somehow, improbably, he felt more hopeful than he had in years. Perhaps it was the simple fact of having his family together again. Or perhaps it was the knowledge that they were fighting for something that mattered. Not just their land, but justice itself. Ruth brought him a cup of coffee, settling beside him on the small porch as the boys played quietly inside. "What happens after?" she asked softly. If we make it to the capital, if Blackwood is stopped, what then? Eli considered the question. We go home, rebuild, start over. He glanced at her. All of us. She looked surprised. All? I made a promise to your father, Ruth. A promise I failed to keep for too long. If you're willing, there's a place for you with us. He smiled slightly. I think Sarah would have approved. Ruth's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I'd like that, she whispered. Very much. The moon rose high over Silver Falls, casting the town in silver light. In the distance, a wolf howled, the sound echoing off the mountains. Another answered, closer. Eli listened, reminded of something his father had once told him. Wolves mate for life, son. When you hear them calling to each other across the valley, that's not hunting. That's family, finding their way back together. He smiled at the memory. His own family, against all odds, had found their way back together, and whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as one. The Valley Master had come home. End of Part 5, story complete.